remind members to declare interest on an ongoing basis, and all mobile phones be switched off, and then your tablet, if you can put your tablet onto the mute mode, and I need to do that myself. Great overview of today's business. First item, obviously, is the ministerial briefing session. I'm delighted to welcome the Minister and your team. Very nice to see you, Minister. Thanks. And we then, after the ministerial briefing, then we're going to continue with our informal close by close, and I can see Linda there already. Yes, and we're going to have a long session this morning. Going to have a break at about 12, a quick bite of lunch, and then we want to continue to finish or to do as many clauses as we can still, because we've only really got 2 more weeks to go. Okay, members.
Chair, I might have to leave because there's a meeting of the Justice Committee in the Long Gallery.
Okay.
About 1:45.
Okay. Okay. In the Long Gallery.
Yes,
okay.
I understand.
You get a better
okay. Okay. That's fine.
a better offer.
Pardon?
You get a better offer.
Okay, members. So far, we haven't got any apologies. Members aware of any other apologies? No. Okay.
Ian Millen sends his apologies, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Members, then we are going to now begin our session with the Minister. At page 5, you have a Secretariat cover note on all the issues we want to talk to the Minister. There are also a number of papers for your background information, and I'll tell them as we go on to the item. We certainly want to discuss with the Minister, and we have sent a list of topics to the Minister on the local government bill, taxis legislation, the report on illegal waste activities in Northern Ireland, the single planning policy statement. Now, that obviously, when we sent a list to the Minister, we didn't realise that I didn't know the Minister was going to have a written and an oral statement this week. So, members, if you're content and if the Minister's content, maybe we could just skip this and give us a bit more time to spend on talking with other items with you, or if the Minister want to maybe add anything else after the oral session. I think everyone from the committee, nearly everyone, had an opportunity on Tuesday to ask the Minister a question following your statement. So if members are content, we could skip that item.
Chair, I think we have time.
You so okay.
Questions if we have time, yeah.
All right.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to skip it, but I don't want to restrict members in anything they want to ask about.
You think you want to ask the Minister a question
Chair,
or two?
that's not to say we got the answer we wanted in the chamber, but we'll say if there's a bit of time,
I didn't maybe an questions I wanted either.
there may be an odd question.
Okay. Fair enough.
But we'll stick to the flower that you've identified.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. See the interest in it, Minister. So the next item of the SPPS is climate change, and then the Minister also wants to, I think, update us on the status of Explorers. Let me see. So the first issue, maybe if I can later on, then we're going to talk on particularly not every clause that we want to ask the Minister, but the ones that Linda had said that maybe would need to go back to speak to the Minister. And I know Linda had a long session with the Minister on, I think, on Wednesday, or yeah. So maybe we can have some update on the issue. And again, welcome all the other officials and over there as well. So you've got a big team with you today, Minister. Certainly all very, very welcome. So if we start with the local government bill, Minister, is only going through, and well, lots of issues from stakeholders, but Sonia Linder and her team has been working very hard and working with us every week now, nearly in the last month or so. So there's still some issues, and we want to talk to you. The first one is clause 4, disqualifications. Still about the politically restricted posts, and about also, you know, the staff working staff, whether they should be allowed to stand in the local in their own council or other councils, and also another issue is about staff on secondment from the department to councils, whether they should be restricted, and also those working in council but funded by other bodies, are they also going to be restricted from standing for local councils? So over to you, Minister.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank you and the committee for all the effort and attention that you have given the bill throughout, but particularly so over the past number of weeks over this consideration stage. I'm aware of the work, obviously, that you have been doing, but also the work that you still need to do, even today. So I'll try not to detain you too long this morning. As regards Clause 4 and the disqualification of council employees, sorry, not the disqualification, the permitting of council employees now to run for council, I was keen to hear the views of committee on this and to get some feedback on the committee's discussion the other evening. The view that I would be of would be, obviously it would be very restricting on an employee, as both an employee and a councillor, should they be a councillor on the council that employed them. I know there was also suggestions that it could be difficult for other councillors as well as difficult for other employees, and we're looking at what practice there is in other jurisdictions where this takes place. I know in some areas council employees over a certain grade or position, if you like, are disqualified, and in other areas someone would just not be allowed to be a councillor or run to be a councillor in the council that employed them. What were the views of the committee then in conclusion?
I think we do understand the difficulties with legislation. We can't just have a blanket ban, and I think members certainly would be happy to look at, I think, either way, whether it's with grades or politically sensitive positions, or when employees are working with other councillors. So I think it's up to you, Minister, to decide which route you want to take.
Sure, I mean, maybe could I appreciate, I don't think I was there whenever the discussion was taking place in this, and it does seem a little bit like a hand grenade getting thrown from side to side with a pin out in that regard. But I mean, what considerations maybe been, as you mentioned, I think the big problem I think people will see will be the issue, I think you rightly highlighted, both for the employee and for the council itself, of the issue of somebody who is employed by the council then being a councillor. I think where there's a distinction, whether there may be something that maybe better could be done around things than it was. At the moment, obviously, there's a blanket ban which then prevents anybody who is a council employee anywhere being on any council, as to whether if the restriction was then reduced, so it wasn't a blanket ban, but reduced then to somebody couldn't be a councillor on the council to which they worked, and had that as the sort of the. I mean, I think realistically, I can't imagine that you're going to get, with the best will in the world, like a chief executive in one council looking to be a councillor in another. But what you might get is you might get a council employee in a sort of a Dungannon looking to be a councillor in Coleraine or whatever way it happens to be, and that is more. I appreciate, obviously, my colleague to the right wouldn't necessarily assume that anybody want to be going outside Dungannon. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's an employee in Coleraine looking at that. I mean, I don't know whether something could be framed around that as being the thing, because that seems to be the more sensible route. And I appreciate the problem is the concern of vulnerability over simply a blanket ban rather than something which has been more, whether something that is more nuanced is something, I think,
Yeah,
from the court's point of view.
but without a doubt, it'll be the blanket ban will not be in existence. It's just where we end up. I think it is key here. And even if you're talking about an employee in one council sitting on another council, should there be a restriction or a limit on the level of employee? Because it shouldn't be the case, but the reality is many councils see each other as being in competition with each other as well. So if someone sat on a council and therefore had access to commercially sensitive information that might be of benefit to another council, that could be an issue that might arise as well.
Well, I mean, unless Chairman, the other route, I suppose, then to nuance that would be that you had still a prohibition on anybody serving on the council which they worked for, and then maybe a prohibition above, at a higher level. You had that two-tier sort of prohibition type of thing. I mean, it strikes me that from what's been done in the European imperative in terms of the court side of it, is, I think, provided you can show that it's not against a ban per se, but potentially to show that it's not an unreasonable level of ban, so that it's provided you can show there's a rationale behind the levels of the ban, and that it's not completely blanket. I don't see where there's going to be a successful case against that on those circumstances.
Yes. Conor.
Most of us make decisions in life, and we then have to stand by those decisions. Some decide on a career in local government, it's fine. Some decide on a career on the other side of it, on councils, although it's hard sometimes to see with a career, but it is in that. But anyway, I do have a big problem with members of a council at perhaps indeed all level ending up on another council, a neighbouring council, as a councillor and going out working for another. I think it's a case of where some are going to be more equal than others here.
Yeah.
And it is going to create, I think, problems. I am acutely aware of what legislation says around equality and all of that, and I'm quite clear on that. But, and then, Minister, you have said there will not, I think, did you say there will not be a blanket ban?
Yeah.
Well, that's where some will be more equal than others then. And I think that creates a problem too.
That could be the challenge in itself.
Yes, I do see a potential challenge there. And rightly or wrongly, I'm of the view that if you decide that your career is in local government, you have made that decision, knowing what you were doing, and that's fine. Well, then stick by that and stay by that.
I think the issue is the blanket ban itself has been challenged successfully in other jurisdictions.
I don't think you can be a gamekeeper and a poacher at the same time. I think that's a real difficulty.
But not in the same state.
No.
Yes. I think we have to go with preventing conflict of interest. That would be the main primary point to go onto, whether the positions are going to be difficult for employer and the employee, whether there's going to bring in that line of confusion or a conflict of interest. I think that's all we can go on.
Yeah, well, of course, there is the work being done on the code of conduct as well that will address and deal with issues around conflict of interest in this scenario and others that will arise. Like when I had a brief discussion on this with Linda and the team the other evening after committee, I discussed it. I wondered where this, or what would, I suppose, qualify as a council employee if someone's in a post funded by council, for example, and if council is going to be taking on community development function from DSD, so someone is in a post that's fully funded from council, would that classify them as a council employee? I'm assured that it's not, but again, I think this will be open to suggestions of potential conflicts of interest. I think it's in all our interest to ensure that the legislation we do end up with here reduces, if not eradicates, any potential for lack of transparency.
What's the legal advice to the department on this, Minister?
On the blanket ban, the legal advice is that it is against the European Convention. I think it's Article 10, which is the free expression. And it's actually around elections and the ability to stand. So it's that part of the European Convention. And I suppose that's what's been driving the need to put a clause in that lifts the blanket ban, albeit, as the Minister said, I think there is a need to think both geographically and in terms of position as to how to limit that in such a way that it will minimise the real and very clear conflicts of interest. And then, should any conflict of interest arise, should a council employee become a councillor in another area, that would be dealt with through the code. And that's maybe where we're going to end up in terms of trying to get a balance in this.
Just if you're an employee of that council, you cannot stand
And I
at
think
that
that
council, but a neighbouring one you can, where you live for.
Yeah. And I think that the point is also well made about
Definitely stable to a certain grade.
employees who are people who are contracted to the council or working on secondment to the council. And I think we will have to look at that because, to all intents and purposes, a secondment into the council, you're working for the council. I think, though, when you look at funded posts, that's where it might get a bit more difficult. But, I think we still have a bit of work to do to just define the spread of who may or may not be impacted by this.
Okay. Would that need to come in through amendments or guidance?
Likely at this stage through subordinate legislation, because the bill states that the department will determine those people who will be prevented from standing as councillors. So the ban will be lifted, but there'll be restrictions put in. So it's likely to be something that will be brought through in subordinate legislation.
Just the only point then on that is...
Sorry, Ian, you would like to come in, Ian?
Yeah. In respect of, you've said, and I tend to agree with Lord Morrow in respect, I have major concerns about this, and I've spoken to chief executives of councils who have major concerns about this, regardless of whether it's their council or their councillors on another council, because of, to some extent, the political cover that individual may have if, in fact, the council is, say the majority of members were of that same councillor's party, even though he's on another council, there's an element of cover there if anything or conflict does come up. But I've more of a concern around the fact that, and I suppose until we get what grade of person we're referring to, if you're saying it's not going to be a blanket qualification, so we need to get to whatever that point is, because I can imagine, I think I raised it at a previous meeting, if you have two members of staff who are basically doing a similar job, working in the same room, and one is a councillor and the other isn't. One is of one religion and the other isn't. There is the potential for sickness absence of one because they've put a complaint in because of something that other councillor has said in respect of maybe something that's been doing as a political representative on another council. And there's so many difficulties that I have. You have the whole complaint process, and Colin Frawley will be all over it, and a whole lot of money. And I just think it leaves it so open for challenge, and leaves that individual open, that complaints can be made without foundation. And that is one of many issues that I have. And I just think that, whilst I said it, I think that political parties have to think when they're selecting who they're selecting, but it's something that I know that senior officers within councils are very concerned about, plus the fact that if that councillor and councillors currently in employment are given certain rights to attend meetings and stuff through their, out their time of employment, that allows that other councillor to have rights to get out of his council employment to go to another council. So it causes more problems than I think it does any good. But I see where you're coming from, the legal side of things. But I think parties have to be mindful of all of this.
I take on board your concerns and some of the potential pitfalls that you've highlighted there, but unfortunately, quite a lot of those, if not all of those pitfalls, I think will exist anyway. Like, I mean, a person, how far should, if there is a blanket ban to remain, should that blanket ban go further? Should there be a ban on local government employees being party members, for example? I mean, would that not provide them cover, as you put it, from political representatives on that council? Unfortunately, the potential does already exist for people from maybe different backgrounds or with different political views to fall out over such, and it's not just differences of political opinion, far from it, that lead to people going off sick and what have you. People in public life have a right to time off to perform their duties as an elected representative, regardless of who their employer is. And I know it's something that causes some employers, as well as some councillors, quite a lot of headaches and stress. I think one of the arguments that or questions, I suppose, that had been raised in the Assembly when this issue came up had been, it was seen as a blanket ban on council employees being in council was seen as an infringement of their human rights. I think it was Lord Marlow that might have asked. How then were MLAs being prohibited from being councillors as well? I think, did we not have human rights at the MLAs?
Some being more equal than others.
Yeah.
Syndrome that we've got into. So it is.
Chair, I'm just going to raise maybe just a wee bit of clarification of Linda on that, but whenever you talked about the subordinate legislation being the vehicle for some of the detail to be sketched in, I suppose the only complication potentially I'd see with that is if it's not clear on the face of the bill what is intended, does that potentially leave us where about to head into elections? And I appreciate a lot of the stuff may not be fully through by election day. Does it not, at a slight degree of danger, if it potentially leaves maybe individuals or parties or whatever when it comes to who candidates are and who gets elected, with a slight degree of grey area or uncertainty ahead of those if the position isn't sketched out very clearly ahead of that process?
Yeah, and I can see the issue with that, because clearly this bill will not be in place in time for selections, and I know some parties are looking at selecting already.
Some have done, haven't they?
Some have done.
I think the bulk of parties probably have done on that sort of thing.
Yeah, and actually at the moment, because at the moment the law is that there is a blanket ban, there's an assumption therefore that that won't change until there's a new law in place, and we haven't got the law through yet. So the blanket ban is actually in place for this forthcoming election.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, I would.
Because that's the current state of play.
Okay. But then the law is going to be through by hopefully April, ahead of election
Yes,
in May.
but I think by that
People can then still change, can still select.
A lot of horses on a vote.
A lot of
Yeah. Sorry, Pam, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. No, I do tend to agree with my party colleagues here, and but coming down the line of more sensible to keep actually the blanket ban in place. I think it actually really leaves you more open to challenge actually, and bringing making it acceptable in any way. I mean, because where do you stop? Where do you draw the line and say, well, to this level or that level that you can be a councillor, and then after that you can't? It's going to actually lead to more issues in the workplace.
I suppose then if someone was a councillor, it would couldn't be considered for promotion in their other job.
Yes, and yeah, you know, I think it's kind of opening the can of worms that that might actually be.
Like I say, I've no doubt it would be simpler if retain the blanket ban. However, the legal advice is pretty explicit.
Yeah.
Well, not explicit enough maybe, but it's pretty clear. I should say that the blanket ban is untenable.
And if you know it's illegal, you just can't put it on the face of your bill.
Yes.
That's out there now,
Yeah.
and I mean, you'd be just asking for challenge.
I know. So,
And there are other instances. I mean, for example, civil servants can be counsellors. Civil servants at certain levels can be counsellors.
You don't have to respond to that.
yeah, yeah.
And I know I accept it's a different level of government, but you know, you could imagine that, you know, if you're a civil servant in one department and your council has an argument with that department,
Yeah.
and that I suppose is where, you know, as the Minister said, you know, the code of conduct and the potential for conflict of interest, I think that would need to be very carefully monitored and managed for those where there could be potentially at times conflicts because of their dual role as an employee of another council and a member of another council.
So we need to decide on this fairly soon, though. What's your decision, Minister?
Chair, can I just ask the Minister before he was, how did you square the circle? Now, I suspect it wasn't you that did it. It was your predecessor. How did you square the circle in relation to councillors or MLAs not being... You got the legislation there where MLAs can't stand for councillors. Can you adopt the same inequality on this one as you?
I lost that one. On over the seat in Madonna. Surrender the seat in Madonna.
Not just
It's easier to ask
MLA,
this question now that you're not, not double barreled, you know.
Not the seat and walk out.
No, well, like at this stage, I can say that the blanket ban has to go, and will be going. So we will be looking at the way I'd be viewing it now, and again, this could change. Would be employees up to a certain level will be able to run for election in another council area, but not in their own. And I don't know how likely this is going to be or how regular an occurrence this is going to be, but it covers us legally.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think poses the least possible risk.
Sure. A reasonable compromise.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, members, we moved on to the next clause. Any questions? Pam, you want to ask a further question?
No, it was just to really kind of reiterate the point that I think I can understand because of the legal opinion wanting to remove the blanket ban, but I do think it's going to make it much more complicated, much more worse, and I think people will feel more aggrieved actually that, you know, X person in their council is allowed to, you know, to run for council, but actually, you know, because I earn another £1,000 or I'm a grade higher or whatever, that I'm not allowed to. I think it actually leaves you open to more challenge, but I understand where the department's coming from at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you look at the positive side, the employees now can say, you know, previously there was the ban, nobody could stand, but now at least some people can stand. So you look at it that way. I think in reality, staff do understand. You don't want to hassle.
Yeah, I think the
to be
disqualification will
so
be for
confused
those
with
in
it.
politically sensitive positions, but again, that's open or so wide as well. What politically sensitive?
You'll find very few people would want to take it on and, you know, stand and, you know, be looked over the shoulder by others. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Tom. Right. Tom, we are on page 5. So we moved on to the next one. Hot potato. Clause 10, positions of responsibility. Minister, the committee was unable to reach broad agreement on this clause and expressed concerns about the allocation of positions of responsibility within councils. So whatever method,
Right, you've singled here.
the Hunt, STV,
Because
Zenlai,
you had no interest in it, or was it just for the parents?
I mean, certainly my party would want to see STV
Of their overall.
as a default position rather than the Hunt.
Yeah.
We see that as more favourable to the larger parties.
Well, our view on that would be that there isn't the need for a change, that the policy on positions of responsibility was agreed by the 5 main political parties through the work of the Policy Development Panel and the Strategic Leadership Board already, so we wouldn't see the need to deviate from that.
Sorry, Stuart.
We wouldn't see the need to deviate from that.
Okay, okay. Members content with the Minister's answer? Okay, we moved on then. The next clause we want to talk to you, Minister, is clause 23. Departmental officials agreed to report back to the committee after discussions with you on proposals for the regulations for operation of executive arrangements and the allocation of functions between the Council and its executive, and the minimum number for an executive streamline committee. I think people are a bit concerned about the minimum number, that maybe it needs to be more than 4. So is that any movement on that, Linda and Minister?
Well, these issues will be specified both in the subordinate legislation. I'm not sure the need exists to change it here.
Members,
Yeah, the legislation says a minimum of 4
To
or
legislate.
10.
Pre-existing group of people.
Oh, yes,
You know,
yes,
there's
yes.
a difference.
23. This is the wrong one. It's right on. Sorry, this is wrong on my screen. I'm sorry. I thought I hadn't read it at home last night. No, this is wrong. So members, disregard that on your screen. Clause 23 is permitted forms of governance. Sorry, we need clarification. If committees outside the executive, particularly quasi-judicial committees such as licensing or planning, would be subject to call-in or qualified majority vote. So
Well,
we
again-
need just the committees outside of executive, particularly like the licensing and planning, whether they would be subject to call-in or qualify or QMV
Again,
as well.
That's not a method of escape or of evasion, but this will again be sorted with the subordinate legislation, so there's no need for a change here in the legislation.
So, sorry, would they be subject to call-in and QMV as well, the committees?
Well, that isn't required to be clarified here in the legislation.
Chair, just on that, because I didn't particularly express an opinion on this whenever it came up on it, but again, it's not a neater way that if it was accepted, for example, that on a basic quasi-judicial decision, whether it's a licensing or a planning decision,
Yeah.
I think it shouldn't be something that is subject to a call-in mechanism.
Precisely.
Surely the easiest way would it not be on the face of the legislation to say, to make that clear? That not be relatively easily done rather than simply leaving it to QMV. I mean, you've got, I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head what clause it is, but there's clauses which set up the QMV, there's clauses which set up the call-in mechanism. You know, it's not relatively straightforward to simply add in a line saying that a decision involving of a judicial nature would be excluded from, or words to that effect, or quasi-judicial on that side, licensing or planning.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that anything that is around licensing or planning where it is quasi-judicial, there would be other mechanisms to safeguard against those, and so those wouldn't be subject to QMV. Now, as I said, our intention was to make that clear in the subordinate legislation as opposed to on the face of the
But
bill.
I mean, I don't know. Well, put it this way, unless there's some great technical reason why not, but why that simply couldn't be on the face of the bill And I mean, if something which I think is relatively uncontroversial, because I think from that point of view, I think everyone would accept that that is something. I don't know, maybe what?
Very controversial.
No, what I meant was that the issue that shouldn't be something that's subject to QMV is something I think that broadly speaking would be agreed across the parties, because it's it would leave councils very vulnerable if it was. I'm not quite sure why possibly a simple line within, or a line or two lines within legislation
itself
may actually abrogate the need for specific, reasonable chunkier references within subordinate legislation.
Well, if you're in agreement, we can have a look at trying to put that into the...
Can't think of any reason why not.
Yeah, that will clarify the position, and make it clearer. So, okay. Members, we moved on to the next clause for the Minister, is clause 25, Council Executives. We need further information on which committees can be streamlined, the role and voting rights of the Mayor and Deputy Mayor, and the minimum number on an executive committee. Minister, we just really want to know which committees are going to be streamlined, and whether we've been told the Mayor and the Lord Mayor would have right to sit in, but no voting right.
Sure, I mean, maybe make a suggestion. I mean, I'm not sure that it does strike me as a little bit odd to be able to say what can be streamlined and what can't, because that kind of, I suspect, will be where you are on the spectrum. Because I think one of the mistakes I think has been made a little bit at times in this, where people have viewed it, is they've either seen essentially the current committee system or a cabinet system and see it almost as neither or, where it's more actually, I think, a spectrum, the way particularly it develops along that. So I'm not sure there can be a particular answer on what specifically can go into streamline and what can't. It strikes me, I understand the concern in terms of the Mayor and Deputy Mayor, or the Chair and Vice Chair, and in a lot of councils, ex officio, more or less the Mayor and Deputy Mayor or the Chair and Vice Chair sit ex officio in every committee in a lot of cases. I appreciate, particularly in a cabinet style, the argument would be that if you had, say, a Mayor and Deputy Mayor sitting as of right on that cabinet and having a full role in that potentially will unbalance the cabinet at various stages on it. The concern would strike to me, I mean, the way possibly around that would be that if, in terms of the legislation, it was provided that the Mayor and Deputy Mayor from those positions would have a right to be on that cabinet, but if non-voting members might be the way around that, sort of might be the which doesn't, or at least that they wouldn't have a vote as of the right of being a Mayor and Deputy might be the way around it.
Some of the concern arises maybe from the scrutiny of the executive committee and who would lead it, if you like, from the council, the wider council, if the Mayor and Deputy Mayor were sitting on it.
Although, is it not going to look a little bit strange? I mean, if you have a cabinet-style situation where cabinet, in one sense, taking decisions on behalf of the overall council, and the person
Mayor has to defend.
Then the person then who's leading the charge against the council is actually the Mayor of the council. That, I think, certainly could be very confusing from a public. Sorry?
The Mayor will have to go out in the media and defend.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a slightly odd situation of, the media, there's some dispute happens in ex-council, and you get sort of whoever is chairing up or leading the cabinet giving one view, and they then wheel out give an opposite view of the sitting Mayor. That, I think that would look very strange, to be honest on it, and I think. But I appreciate, obviously, the argument I think that was used that because you're likely to have changing personnel and changing parties in terms of who the Mayor, Deputy Mayor is, or Chair and Vice Chair, that to have them as full members of any cabinet, if you have a system, could then unbalance the sort of balances which are meant within that. But I mean, possibly a way around that, as I says, to permit that, but permit it on the basis that they don't have a vote in sort of in that capacity. Yeah.
In that scenario, who would you envisage then chairing, say, the scrutiny committee within the council? Would that be?
Well, presumably on the basis that you would have. I mean, presumably the one thing in relation to that, whoever's chairing the scrutiny committee would actually probably be on the same grounds as whenever you're doing your selection, because presumably if you're dividing up the positions of responsibility at the start of the thing, if you've adopted a cabinet style, presumably the decisions on who actually serves in the cabinet would be taken at that stage. And presumably, therefore, in the same way as you would choose a chair of policy or a chair of, because even if you've got a cabinet style, you're still going to have some level of committees underneath that. Presumably, you would choose, by whatever regulations, a chair of the scrutiny committee at that stage as well. And that may be something which changes from year to year in the same way as a sort of a chair of planning or a chair of policy or whatever would change.
So rather than the mayor automatically being the chair?
I have to say, I think,
Mayor
to be honest,
council rather than
I mean, the mayor will be somebody who will be effectively the civic face of the council. I think it's actually very difficult, to be perfectly honest, for the mayor, because potentially whoever's as chair of scrutiny could be the person who is most in either direct conflict or the one holding greatest accountability of the council on that basis. I think that could actually be a very awkward position for whoever's mayor, to be perfectly honest on it, because I think almost their public bit of defending the council on one side, but yet then potentially being there as the main internal critic. I think it's very difficult, to be perfectly honest, for somebody to ride those two horses. And that's it.
What's the current practice, Peter?
We don't have cabinets as the current practice.
No.
Right.
But I mean, I think it will vary between council to council. But in most cases, I would think, I mean, I know certainly the council I was on, I think in most cases, a lot of councils will have in their standing orders that maybe the mayor, whoever's that year's chair thing, may be an ex officio member of all committees. It's the right at least to turn up to all committees. Someone will extend that to the deputy as well. It will vary from area to area a little bit, but there will generally speak be some sort of. It's kind of difficult to.
But that's what's proposed.
When assigning positions, Peter, I mean, that's what happens. I mean, Armagh is an executive style, but the chair, or the mayor doesn't sit on executive.
Yeah.
Chair some of the meetings, certainly.
Chair,
don't sit on it. I mean,
Chair
so it's only when you assign.
How can somebody chair the meetings while not sitting on it?
No, I'd say the chair of the full meeting, but the executive council is made up of a member of each party.
Yeah.
The mayor's not on that executive.
He can't attend those
They
meetings.
don't attend that. That's that executive style. So they don't. And if you're assigning the positions on a 4-year basis,
I understand that. I could see a situation.
and you know what I mean. I'm only trying
No, I
to
understand that.
I'm only trying to tease-
Again, I'm not sure that's an ideal situation. That you have somebody who's the mayor, who's the official face of the council, yet they're not actually there. They're not even present then when the most significant decisions are actually taken about the council. And I think that's
Well, the recommendations go back to the full council, but what I'm saying is that's the style that's been used. I'm only trying to, if it's a case, which is fair enough. It's a fair point. I'm only saying we're talking about the scenarios that can arise, and that's what happens. Now, I do see some problems in that. Was there a representative of the area, of the civic face of the area? That's I'm only using that's what happens with my executive at the minute. But the positions are assigned on a 4-year basis. So.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I see three, under the new dispensation, I see 3 discrete roles. One, the civic role of the mayor, deputy mayor, people like that. A very public one, and one chairing the plenary sessions of council. And then I see the role of the cabinet, the executive, which is an executive role, an executive function for the cabinet members, and a collective one as well. And then the rest of the council, as it were, involving themselves in scrutinising the decision-making process of the council, of the executive. So you've got 3 discrete roles, and I don't think you can mix the 3, except whenever they come together in plenary. I mean, if in the current situation, all councils would have a general purposes committee or a P&R committee, policy and resources committee. You have a separate chair of the policy and resources committee who has a very significant role in the council. But that's not the mayor or deputy mayor, and that makes it plain the differentiation between the discrete roles that councillors will have, I think, in a future arrangement of this type.
Yeah, but the mayor and the deputy mayor can attend those meetings ex officio. Any councillor can.
Chair, again, and this is probably one of the myriads of, swings and roundabouts of flexibility within that. Different councils will take different. Now, I'm not sure necessarily whether there's an exclusion on the mayor, but I know in my previous council, pretty much any councillor could go along to any meeting, I would be aware of another council that would be relatively close to where I would live, that took a view that the only people who were in attendance at any committee meeting were those councillors on that committee, and didn't have a right of attendance if you weren't on that committee. You know, so there has been slightly different practice done in different councils and that.
But at the
Within
moment, the mayor and the Lord and the deputy mayor in plenary session, I'm sure they can vote. Are they barred from voting? In
Oh, no,
plenary
they're
session?
not, no.
But there is a provision in the bill now to make all meetings and all committee meetings open to all councillors.
It should be.
Okay, Colin?
Actually, I think that makes sense, actually, because I've attended meetings that I wasn't on, if there was a specific issue that was relevant to my constituents or whatever. But I understand the point about the separation of powers, but it's a slightly different system. We're not in America yet, and there's a different kind of a system here. And, you know, the First and Deputy First Minister here come in and vote in the Assembly, even though they chair the executive meetings.
President,
We're not there yet either. We're working on that one. But I think that the mayor and deputy mayor, at least the mayor, should be able to at least attend the meetings. I understand the reason why they wouldn't be able to vote, but I do think, having done the role before, I think, you know, you do have to go out and you have to defend the council decisions. Very difficult to do that when you're not, you know, involved necessarily in some of the decision making, and some of these decisions might be taken without the council's involvement. You know, so I do think there needs to be at least a kind of a working knowledge of what's going on, and, you know, I don't see any problems in being sitting at the meetings, but maybe not necessarily having a vote.
Yeah, well, as it stands, that can happen within the bill. There's provision for that.
I think the issue would be, you know, we're making all the meetings open to everybody, you know, councillors, public, press, everybody. The issue would be if you felt strongly enough that they need to be ex officio members, and what is the fundamental difference between that and them attending the meetings? If they can't vote.
45.
Yeah, just to go over this again, because just to explain the Armagh executive model, one member from each party and they bring a recommendation. The mayor normally chairs the statutory council meeting one. If the recommendation comes there, then that's agreed there. And they can sit, any councillor can sit in on any meeting. They can sit there and be called. But I'm trying to figure out what would the problem be, because the mayor there is to represent the whole area. It's a recommendation the council agreed by the corporate council. They're representative. Are we saying here that because the mayor can't vote that they have some kind of special power representative? They're only speaking on behalf of the council itself. So I'm trying to figure out what the...
I mean, I suppose the other bit, which maybe something that maybe I hadn't entirely realised, if we're talking about that everything is open to everybody, I mean, in one sense, does that mean that we're envisaging a cabinet taking place, which is a cabinet or executive of the council meeting, which is every cabinet or executive meeting, is, apart from if there's some particular sensitive matter, that it's fully open to the public?
That's the presumption in the bill.
It's not normally the way, the best one in the world. I mean, personally, I'm not saying necessarily it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's not normally the way that cabinets or executives operate on that basis.
It depends, obviously, on the business of the day, so you might find that it's closed more often than it's open.
Well, okay.
I don't mind if they can't vote.
Okay. Well, no further question on this? Okay. We moved on then to clause 45, that's the call-in minister criteria to be used to determine the validity of a call-in, and the guidance to be provided to solicitors and barristers. There's the opinion that you asked different solicitors, they'll give you perhaps a different opinion. And there's suggestion also of perhaps a panel of solicitors who can give maybe more consistent response rather than individual solicitors used by different councils. And also, yes, the criteria is quite important about, you know, when call-in can be, just more clarification needed on the criteria for call-in.
Yeah, I mean, we did discuss this with the Minister, and I think the issue here is the need for a barrister or a solicitor was actually determined at the time when all of this policy was being sorted out as a safeguard against call-in being misused for political purpose. I think now this is an additional safeguard on the safeguard measure. And, and when you look at a panel, you know, how would that be constructed? Who would appoint it? Would it be the whole panel? Would it be one?
As well.
You know,
Sorry to interrupt a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure, Linda, is maybe that's when I say 100% accurate in the sense of whenever you said, because I was involved with the PDP panel discussions in this, I think there was agreement at that stage that there needed to be some form of referral outside to be able to determine legitimacy of it. There wasn't any mechanism determined that it be simply referred to a barrister or solicitor. There was no agreement on that.
Right.
That was one of the issues, just in the way the timing went. I think it was an issue which may well have been tackled by the panel had things moved on.
Right.
But I think it's one of those areas that was still really to be discussed and resolved whenever previously in RPA it was then put on ice in that regard. So there wasn't a specific agreement or indeed a common understanding that the process would be that the Chief Executive was simply referred to barrister solicitor. What was agreed was that there would have to be some form of mechanism which determined whether a call-in was legitimate or not.
right. Yeah, and I suppose then when you look at the seeking of legal advice, I mean, some councils already have, and we are actually assuming that some of the larger councils that are being created will have their own internal legal in-house solicitor. So if there was a need to go outside the council to seek legal advice from some sort of independently appointed panel, first of all, what position would that put the council's own legal advisor in? You know, is there then an assumption that there isn't a trust in the legal opinion or the professional input from that legal advisor inside the council itself? And then I think there are other issues around, you know, how the panel would be constructed, how that would work, and how the call-off would happen, or would it be the whole panel sitting? And I think, you know, there's a feeling that it is
Minefield.
a bit of a minefield actually, and could cause more problems than it was there to resolve.
Bringing in another layer of
Well,
problem.
no, Chair, I suppose there's two issues in relation to that. To be fair, I think there's both the mechanism was done and the grounds in which it's done. I think, to be fair, probably the biggest concern was that there was very clear-cut guidance on here is essentially what counts as a legitimate call-in on the basis of how reference, for instance, made to the community side of things is determined. At least some level of guidance on that, I think, would be helpful. The issue as regards to the internal, I mean, from the point of view of a internal legal advice, I think with the exception of Belfast, which have got their own internal solicitor, most councils don't have and I suspect under a new system won't have either. Most councils, and maybe there's other councils who waste ratepayers' money on that basis as well. The position on it is most councils, in terms of economies of scale, don't have an internal lawyer. What they will have is they will have a town solicitors. Now, the only concern I would have, for instance, if something is simply keeps on, for instance, being referred either internally or quasi-internally, that it goes to that, is if you're a firm of solicitors who are asked to rule on stuff that will affect the council, would there be a reticence for them to rule against what they would see as the majority position? No, I mean, any call-in will come in from a minority position on it. If it's felt that, you know, are they going to feel a degree of restriction on the basis of, if we're too awkward, if we actually block too many council decisions by way of agreeing to a call-in, agreeing that's legitimate, are we going to risk the next time whenever it comes up for appointment of the solicitors, is that going to reach any? I mean, I think that probably has to be, in some way, independently, at least outside of the council, decided in that regard. And I think there is also a bit of a danger that simply if it's referred to a solicitor or barrister, that you don't have consistency. That's maybe means maybe the route around it is simply to ensure that whatever guidance you've got is very, very tight, very clear cut, so that you are getting consistent decisions across the.
Tom?
Chair, thanks. I think there are two aspects to it. One is the issue of criteria, and I think there needs to be clear criteria and guidance. But the second issue is then who interprets that. Is it the council's own solicitor? Is it the in-house solicitor if the council has one? Or is it some sort of a group or panel? Now, I just think for consistency throughout Northern Ireland, it would be much better if there was a central panel or group. Now, how you would do that, Linda, totally take your point, how you would do it. How do you do any of these things? You come up with a mechanism and a formula and a basis for doing it. That's how we do anything. I don't see that as a barrier in itself. But I just see if it's left to each individual council's own legal advice, you will be into a nightmare situation that you will have blocking mechanisms right throughout councils, and unless, well, even with very strict criteria, and that's absolutely necessary, it's clear criteria that's centralised, because you can't leave that criteria up to each individual council.
There's one possible solution. I think one area has been suggested before. We have within the legislation, if there's a complaint against a councillor, it will go to the Local Government Complaints Commissioner, or whatever the title is. Is there possibly a branch of whatever that office's responsibility that could have operated under it a panel which will determine the legitimacy of call-ins? And just when there is one possible solution, or something of that nature on that, but so you're getting a sort of a Northern Ireland-wide sort of interpretation in that regard.
Yeah. Chair, there's not a department here, I don't think, but has some sort of appeal mechanism for something. DSD have obviously their appeal mechanisms. Department of Agriculture, their appeal mechanisms for appeals. So I don't see why there couldn't be. I'm not saying it's an appeal mechanism, but it is a forum, and I think it would just give more consistency. That's all, and result with less chance of blockages within individual councils. I think that's the key to it.
And take it outside of the council as well.
Yeah.
Give that independence.
I see the rationale behind that, but again, it does throw up even more complications as to around how the panel would be paid for, and by whom as well, by all councils. Because I'm sure there are some councils that
presumably,
never have.
to take an example, and it's a little bit off my top of my head, but if you've taken the local government, my understanding is that what you're looking at by a mechanism in terms of the complaints procedure and the code of conduct as a form of top slicing that would pay for that. If you had a function within that dealt also with determining the legitimacy of call-ins, or another bit as well. I mean, one sense of your top slicing for one thing, it's not a particularly big leap to say there's some additional level of top slicing for another. I think the mechanism for
particularly big slice.
Sorry?
It might be a particularly big slice.
Well, depending upon what's needed in relation to it.
Well, it's the guidance, I suppose.
You're going to need something on that.
But then you also have to think. Then, are you sidestepping the council's own employer, own solicitor? You're duplicating the stuff.
For example, if the decision was taken by this outside body and then it was legally challenged, where would it end up? It's
Sounds like a lawyer's paradise.
Chair, it's going to be a lawyer's paradise one way or the other, because all I'm trying to find is a mechanism. All I'm trying to find is a mechanism that will actually reduce the potential of blockage within councils. I think that's important.
And I suppose this whole debate also calls into question, the independence of the legal profession. And if you're seeking legal advice, and there's an inference that actually it depends who you go to as to what the advice will be.
Peter, would you be please?
Chair, I was just going to say.
Linda, sorry. Let Linda repeat, please.
No, I'm just saying, that the whole discussion actually is premised on the fact that, or the assumption that, if you ask the legal profession for advice, you may not get the right advice, or it might be the wrong advice, and therefore you need some independent legal person. If I was a lawyer, I think I'd be quite nervous.
But Chair, we have to be clear about this. It's different legal advice that keeps solicitors in jobs. That's the reality of it.
Well, that is true.
So if you go to different solicitors, you're going to get different advice. Look, let's not argue about that.
Chair, I mean,
That's a fact.
The
But
issue,
nobody
issue at least of having something consistently
yeah.
is, I mean, leaving aside the right, I mean, with the best one in the world, I'm sure any lawyer will look at the thing dispassionately and independently, but they may well come to very different verdicts. So, to take an example, it is potentially going to bring the thing into a little bit of disrepute if you take the issue of what is intended by, say, the sale of a play park on relation to play park strategy, and there's different ways that can be interpreted. If you get in one council, it then being ruled as a legitimate call-in, and the same thing happens a month down the road in a different council, and it's regarded, well, no, actually, that isn't a cross-community issue. You know, maybe in certain circumstances which the facts are pretty much the same, but people have simply given a slightly different interpretation on it. And that is a danger. It could run the call-in into a degree of
Yeah.
mess in that regard.
But I would say if you have a very clear set of guidelines, the criteria, and it is good actually to have an independent person with a legal mind, the solicitor, to look at it and interpret it, would be better than being debated amongst different party, councillors. I think, it should not be too insulting. It should not be kind of not trusting our solicitors to do their job properly. I think the guidance is important, the criteria, if it's set clearly, easy to interpret. I think perhaps we should leave to our solicitors to do their job.
Committee solicitors in this committee.
I think you'll find, Cathal, there's two sort of barristers, but no solicitors.
Yeah. I'm aware of the time, Minister.
We don't want to have to sue you for libel.
Yeah. We still have quite a few items. I'm just going to. I think it will just leave it there.
Chair, just one other wee issue on the local government stuff, because I appreciate it's not down there. I don't know, could the Minister give us any update on the mention at whenever we had the session on Tuesday, and I think Linda and others, we're seeing the Minister later on the broader issue, there were some concerns over the code of conduct, appeal mechanisms and a couple of other issues in relation to that. I know the indications were given that you were sort of going to be seeking the mind of the Minister that afternoon. I'm just wondering if there's any update that be given that might be.
The officials did come to me on Tuesday afternoon with feedback from their session with the committee, and this issue of the appeals mechanism was one of them. My mind on that would be that there should go on. I think it's important that there's seen to be as open, well, not just seen to be, that we are as open and fair as possible, and I think you had been advocating it during that session, Peter, but I was of a similar mind, certainly.
Okay. So there will be appeal to the High Court, or?
Yeah.
Okay, that you put in an amendment to that effect. Okay. I think that's what a lot of stakeholders, Minister, have put in their comments about that lack of maybe,
I think, Chair, that would be a very positive development. Obviously, the sooner we can see a draft amendment, I think would be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we'll just move on, and we'll talk to Linda further later on. So, members, we are on to the taxi legislation. There is a couple of papers there for members to look at. There's a departmental reply regarding taxi meters, the SL1 at page 10. That's departmental reply again. Another paper is on taxi legislation timetable. That's at page 11. And in fact, there's a very useful timetable, members, at page 16. So if you want to go on to there, it just sets out the timetable the department's going to put through subordinate legislation. Members, Peter and Carl.
Just before we go on to the taxis issue, Minister, obviously this clause has been raised with the Minister. Obviously we're only so far up the bill, we're 50 clauses done. There may be other elements of the bill that maybe is there an opportunity for the Minister to come back? I mean, no problem. No, we've done the first 50 clauses and the issues raised out of the 4 clauses out today. There may be other issues that invite the Minister back to discuss.
if we have time.
Well, then, Chair,
But we're
can I
going
just-
through
can I-
to clause 69.
Well,
So,
the
yeah.
clause 69 is a big issue. I mean, the
Yeah,
community
yeah,
planning
community
element of it.
planning.
And I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I certainly would have liked time to discuss that element of it. And it's a big, big issue. And I mean, when can we get an opportunity to go through that? I mean, it's,
Well, we've only got 2 more weeks, and we're planning for 2 additional meetings for the next 2 Tuesdays.
okay. Chair.
So-
Well, Chair, I have to say, well, I'll say it now and then we'll move on to tax
Sure,
stuff.
sure.
In terms of
Minister,
tax stuff on the community plan, I would like to see an element of active application of social inclusion. I know we'll get into it when the officials are here, but I'm going to call that when the minister's here. There's some opportunities in that bill to address some of those issues, so I'm just mentioning it when the minister's here. But I'm happy to move on to the taxi.
okay. Can I just remind members to switch off your phone? We're picking up a telephone somewhere, a mobile phone somewhere. Okay. Thank you. Minister, and I'm sure you're aware that the subcommittee at the meeting, and we were talking about perhaps a model of a 3-mile exclusion zone for the Belfast public hire. So I just wonder, we know that the officials have gone to talk to you about it, and we certainly talked to Ian at great length at that meeting about maybe the proposal. Another issue want to ask is this timetable now? You gave us a timetable of subordinate legislation. Is it all still on track then? And also, you know, what level now? Is there any further engagement with the Belfast public hire and in relation to, you know, the single tier issue?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, I think first of all it's important to reiterate that the purpose of this Act is to improve standards in the taxi industry for the benefit of consumers and the general public. The issue around the proposed, if you can call it a proposal, 3-mile exclusion zone, I'm not overly warm on, to be honest. Time and time again, I'm getting Assembly written questions from members, and the last time I was here, the issue of enforcement is one that was raised, and our, well, some might say lack of enforcement, although I have to say there has been an increase in enforcement activity over the past few months. However, I think now the introduction and implementation of a 3-mile zone, and I know there were talks around certain times where you might have 2-tier and times single-tier, that's going to make things even more difficult to enforce, not possible, and even more confusing for the public.
Yeah.
Well, Chair, can I mean, look, I think maybe the Minister needs to be aware of the seriousness of this, because there was the subcommittee meeting. You know, I think people are keen, and everybody's keen to get this issue cracked and to get agreement. I think without there being specific regulations for Belfast city centre of some form of exclusion of that, which was something, as was indicated to officials, was floated as a possibility at the time of the taxis bills going through. Like a specific reference on officials made at that stage was to, yes, there's a single tier, it doesn't exclude the possibility of something happening in Belfast separately. And that was just, you know, we can quote the Hansard again in connection with that. That is the key to cracking this, with respect, Minister. And I read the paper that was produced by the Department, which gave sort of nice words about ensuring that implementation would be done in a fashion which would be sort of sympathetic in terms of timetables for Belfast public hire. This, I think, is the key element that is required to get this over the line. Now, you've mentioned, I think arising out of that would relate then, by necessity, would create a sort of a Belfast plate for that particular area. And the other issue, which is non-legislative, you mentioned about enforcement. I think the other element of this is a key commitment. While there is enforcement across Northern Ireland, there's big concerns about what's happening in Belfast on it. And I think if there is a specific commitment to, as part of the overall enforcement, a specific Belfast enforcement team, we're not talking about big numbers, you're talking maybe half a dozen people in connection with that. If those elements are put in place, I think there is something which can be agreed across the board, which everybody can live with. I think if we're simply talking about a longer period of implementation or being in some way vaguely sympathetic to Belfast Public Hire without there being something which directly impacts in on the city centre situation as regards the single tier issue. I don't think there's going to be agreement on this. I don't think the legislation is going through on that basis. Sorry to be blunt on that, but
Okay,
I think it's important that you know very clearly the lie of the land that would be there from a number of us having concerns over this. It's not just coming from one party or one individual. I know it would be shared, I think, by probably at least three parties on this committee who would have very major concerns on that basis. And I think that's the key to providing that accommodation, Minister. And I think it's important maybe that is just made absolutely clear.
No. Well, appreciate your frankness on this. She says this is the key to cracking it. When I assumed this role, I also assumed that this had been cracked and was just postponed until September coming before being implemented. I know that the committee and the Assembly passed an ASL1 for single tier in June. And Lord Morrow said earlier on another subject, sometimes people make decisions in life and we have to stand by those decisions. Like the ASL1 to implement single tier has been passed, and the only way that could be rescinded would be to have it prayed against.
I mean, Chair, I'll just say in relation to that, in terms of what's passed and what can be prayed against, for instance, on that basis, you know, Minister, what I would simply say is we can push all this into a degree of conflict where, you know, we raise the stakes on things and there's actually a situation in which the committee or indeed the Assembly is forced to pray against a particular piece of legislation or indeed enact whatever it is, and it's fairly clear those who have expressed concerns would represent a pretty overwhelming majority of the Assembly in that regard. And I think people don't want to do that. I think they want to see a solution which accommodates the particular situation in Belfast in which there can be a degree of agreement. Now, that will mean that single tier will operate fully throughout the vast bulk of Northern Ireland, and that seems to me the reasonable enough solution which can be put in place in connection. And if it's forced to a situation where actions need to be taken to overturn things that have been there, then so be it in those circumstances. But I think I think it would be very wise to try and all of us to reach a situation in which there is that wider agreement in that regard. And I know others may.
Well, I think I have previously in the Assembly, if not at my last meeting with the committee, displayed, I suppose, a willingness you know, to look at things and a degree of flexibility. Any solution along those lines is going to be extremely difficult to reach. However, I'll say again, I will continue to look at one, but I don't think that we're ever going to get something that's going to keep everyone or make everyone happy.
Well, maybe at least it will have an equal level of unhappiness around the place in that regard. And I think at present you have particularly one section of the industry is deeply unhappy, to a lesser extent other parts. And I think this is what is needed, to be honest, to have something which is viable I think, for people.
And they're just a small minority, though. I mean, Peter, you're talking of how many taxis from the Belfast Public Hire?
You're talking
400.
Yeah, well, you're talking over 400. And I have to say, previously, whenever figures were given, there was a mistake made in providing information to it, in which two of the figures were, I think, roughly off the top of my head, it should have been 439. I think was roughly the thing on it was. That was misread as 349 and then rounded down to 300. So I have to say, you know, on that basis, we're talking about several hundred jobs, and I think with the best will in the world. Again, with a lot of these things, if the taxi industry was starting up tomorrow and nobody was involved in taxis, you may look at a different solution. But we've actually got to deal with what the situation is there, and the situation that is workable in that regard.
But I mean, the taxis legislation came on board in 2008. I mean, the industry has been, in fairness,
and with respect,
given
a
lot of time, many years.
And with respect to Chair, 2 points in relation to that. First of all, whenever it did come in, and I suppose looking around the table, I think Cathal and myself are the only survivors of the First World War in that particular bit. That was not done with
uniform agreement out of everybody. You know, people had different views, and perfectly honest, we were tortured with it for months in that regard. But it was also the case, and it's on the public record, that whenever mention was made of the single tier at that stage, officials did clearly made the thing that they were saying this wouldn't necessarily be something that would apply across all of Northern Ireland, that there could be something that could be looked at in Belfast. We've read that into the public record at the previous occasion, so this is not something which is novel in that regard. And I think we've got to deal with the situation as is. And I think this is a reasonably sensible. I mean, look, people could simply try and direct the single-tier system. That's not what's being said. Indeed, the representation may well be in a position a while ago of some that they simply didn't want single-tier full stop. I think there's acceptance that there will be single-tier for the vast bulk. It is to try and do something which caters for the specific circumstances of Belfast, particularly the centre of Belfast, where there's a particular set of circumstances. And I think that is not unreasonable. And I think it is around something in which there can be. It's a compromise which I think people, if there's a bit of give and take, can actually agree around in that regard.
Would it be fair to say that the problems, confusion created by the two-tier system are nowhere more pronounced than they are in the centre of Belfast?
Yeah. I think we've got to be thinking of the consumer, who is the primary concern for all of us. The quality of taxis and consumer convenience and understanding. You know, if you say, right, within 3 miles, you know, you can only get a black taxi and nobody else.
No, but sorry, that's not actually accurate either on it, because what we'd be saying on that basis is you can still, even within that, get a taxi rank. So you can still actually be, you can get a situation where, for example, you phone up, look for a taxi, you can get a taxi anywhere in that regard on it. What you can't simply do under that would be simply just to pick up a cab at random on that basis. That's where there's a degree of distinction in that regard.
Yeah.
There's nothing to preclude anybody getting a taxi within that. So let's not say that misrepresented.
Whereby then you get the silly situation in the airport now, in the Belfast City Airport. Before you leave the airport, you have to ring a taxi, and the taxi is actually outside in the taxi rank. And you're not allowed to jump into a taxi. You have to call, or there's a desk you approach to ask for a taxi. That's a rule.
Yeah, and with respect on it, there was perhaps previous systems that had operated within the airports. I mean, you know, from that point of view, nobody's suggesting that what is there throughout anywhere is necessarily perfect in that regard. But sometimes where changes have been made, they've not necessarily been made to the benefit. But Chair, I appreciate I maybe hog this. I mean, there may be other committee members who are looking in here as well.
Yeah. How would you want to come in?
There's not much more to say now, Peter's done. But to be fair, I think, you know, we need a solution to this, and I totally agree with what Peter said. I wouldn't like to scupper all the good work that has been put through this committee, and we've given it a fair hearing, and we can look on censor blame on everybody in this, because there's been total lack of enforcement, and it's led to all of this here. We're built in a 2-year review, and whilst people may argue that it actually we haven't enacted the Act in full, it is clearly seen that is not operating and won't operate under a single-tier system. Minister, I mean, I would ask you to seriously consider these issues, because if it's the case that come September and we have to go down the route of looking at it, praying against it, I certainly would consider that. I would hope that we don't have to go that route. There is a group of people out there who has come to us with genuine concerns over the last 6 months. And to be fair also, Chair, we agreed in principle with delaying that rule until September on the premise that this issue would be looked at, talked with through DRD and everybody else to try and get a resolve within the centre of Belfast. And we're not trying to create this issue in relation to people I've met, different people who said, why are you doing this and not doing this for us and for them. If we had thought we were going to bring something through that would stop an actual group of people or create problems within one section of the industry, we certainly wouldn't have done it at the start in the first place. But there was a facility to look at a 2-tier system in relation to Belfast. So if anybody else wants to come to us and say that, look, it may be a case that this is going to operate in, say, the likes of Derry or somewhere else, grand, come and talk to us. But the major issues we've had in this matter has been around Belfast. And we're going to have to get a solution, Minister, and I hope that you will take that on board and bring forward something, no matter how difficult it is. Because when we went through our 17-week period of taking consultation and presentations in relation to the committee's role in this, the issue of enforcement and of all of them things, should have been raised. Should have been raised, and it's taken this length of time. So I would ask you seriously to look at bringing forward some kind of solution in relation to the matter, and would support the comments of the previous member. And also to put on record, Chair, I have met both sides of the industry in relation to this here, and there's concerns on both sides. But I will say this here, stories and the information I gathered over the last 6 to 8 months in relation to this matter, it certainly doesn't stack up in favour of a single tier within the city of Belfast. So it's something we need to seriously look at, because unfortunately come September, if I'm still on this committee, that is, I certainly will be looking at bringing looking at seriously stopping, unfortunately stopping the rule in relation to the single tier itself. And I don't want to do that, because it's good work, and the industry has to clean up its act, both sides as well. We have to recognise that. So I hope that the Minister can bring something forward that will address this.
Okay. Tom?
Chair, thank you. And I think the Minister said at the start this was to provide, I think, a better service and ensure that it was better for the public. And I suppose I look at it, is it better for the public or is it not? And are the rules being obeyed? Or is it going to cost more to the public? And, from what I've seen from my come onto committee, is it's actually going to create more expense to the public, the process. Now, I'm not saying, if you're getting a better service, maybe you have to pay for it, but we need to look at that. The issue around the single or two-tier system, I think what's been suggested in Belfast is that there is a difficulty with enforcement. Enforcement just has not been taking place, and it hasn't been happening. And those that are basically operating outside, whether it's the law or the spirit of the law, nothing has happened, and it hasn't been resolved. And there is no indication that it will be resolved under this system. Now, what I'm hearing is that the changes that are being requested, especially in Belfast, because that's, I think, the only area it applies to. Maybe others will keep me right that there are different areas that there might be the public hire system in this basis, but I don't think so.
No, just Belfast.
Okay. What's being asked for, I don't think, is outrageous or too difficult actually to change and to implement. And maybe if the Minister and the officials would give us an indication if they see that it is too big a job to change or to have the two-tier system in Belfast, then let's hear their argument for not having that two-tier system. But from what I'm hearing is it wouldn't be a huge operation to change it and put that in place.
Who are you hearing that from?
I'm hearing it from the industry, and I'm also hearing it from some people in the public who have an interest, some consumer groups.
Okay. No, well, I have met with Belfast Public Hire, and I'm well aware of their concerns, and they remain committed to helping Belfast Public Hire engage with other government departments in terms of training, business support assistance that can be given to them, and especially with DRD in relation to issues around ranks and bus lanes, which will be a very important issue whenever this act, or if, regardless of whether this proceeds or not, but I'd certainly like this to proceed as planned for September. Okay, Peter was talking about equality there, and when I met with the representatives of Belfast Public Hire, one thing that they stressed to me was that their desire to see a level playing field. But does the creation of the single tier not create a level playing field? And
I think the problem is what I'm hearing, and again, I haven't heard anything, Minister, that you've told me that changes my view, that it's not a level playing field simply because the enforcement is not there to deal with it.
Yeah.
And it's not the enforcement is not
Yeah,
being
but
implemented.
will single tier not create?
So what I'm not hearing is how the proposals that's currently on the table of a single tier system will change that or make it better, and why a two-tier system in Belfast cannot operate with some simple changes to the proposals that there are. I haven't heard any of that. So at this stage, my argument or my sympathy is still with the groups of consumers and industry who are saying a two-tier system would be better immediately in Belfast.
Well, as regards the consumer groups now, I mean, I've had representation from the Consumer Council that strongly advocates a move towards single tier. I've also received
The majority of the majority of respondents throughout the consultation period
no disrespect,
would,
I mean,
I think, support the
no,
majority
no,
of people
no
support
disrespect.
single tier.
There's the consumer element and then there's the provider element. What we're saying here, because we wouldn't have heard so many complaints if enforcement had been taken properly, enacted in Belfast, and it hasn't been, Minister. It hasn't been. But one good thing that it's led to, it's actually led to this issue of the problems that we are going to face under the single-tier system, to be honest with you. And we're glad we've seen it up front, because if that had been the case, and that's where the level playing field hasn't been created for the very fact that I do think, and I'm glad, looking back at it now, that we built in a 2-year review, I'm glad that we did say there was an opportunity for a two-tier system. And, you know, I'll go back and say, repeat what I said, I don't want to go down the line of undoing all the good work that the previous committee did on this here. But it looks as if, and reading between the lines of what you're saying, Minister, you're not even prepared to go back and take a serious look at trying to address this issue in terms of the 3-mile issue. I do agree in one element of it that there may need to be assistance in terms of clearing footfall at a certain period at the weekend. I would agree with trying to get both sides of the industry to look at that. But I certainly think that we need to bring something concrete forward. I
think the Hansard will show that I have stated that I remained open to looking at this, and I do. However, looking at it and coming back with something palatable or acceptable to everyone aren't the same things.
Well, that's a fair point, Minister, but I'll just say this, and thanks, Chair, for letting me in again. The thing is, we had a meeting in December with officials, and we through this for an hour and a half, and we still haven't heard anything.
I mean, Chair, it also wouldn't be unique if we're saying that there may need to be some slight degree of variation on particular times and have those done or whatever. That's not something which is unique. You said about different levels of enforcement. You go down, be it Belfast or anywhere else, there's completely different regulations depending on timing on enforcement of parking, for instance. There's a lot of parking zones are restricted. Things you can't do between 9 and 6 p.m. on it, but we'll have a different regime the minute you go past 6. So I think the idea that there can't be something nuanced which does take account a little bit of timing, again, I think is not one that as an argument will be sustainable in that regard on it.
But as regards to the consumer issue that I had been on before Cahill came back in there, like the Consumer Council are strongly advocating the move towards single tier. Other groups that I have received representation from are also, which is Pubs of Ulster, most recently, in fact, contacted me with a view on it, and I imagine will do so with the committee as
Minister,
well.
That would be a very watertight position if essentially the argument was saying there shouldn't be single tier in Northern Ireland. It should be. That's not what's being said. We're talking about a geographically specific exclusion to deal with this particular problem. It will mean that effectively you'll single tier in the vast bulk of Northern Ireland. So nobody's arguing against that. We're simply trying to find a reasonable compromise solution on that basis.
So it's where the problem is most pronounced, as I've said, is Belfast City Centre. Yeah. Where the two-tier is operated. Nowhere do you have. It is a problem. Yeah. And maintaining people coming down. There are public and private safety issues as well. Obviously, people who want the streets cleared as quickly as possible and around the city centre at night. There are issues of someone trying to wave down a taxi, their own personal safety, that they might have a fear for it, and they're not able to flag one down because, well, maybe 5 taxis that someone has phoned down the street past them, but no one's able to stop for them because no public hire goes past. It's difficult. And they don't know that. They aren't from Belfast and don't
Well, to be fair,
understand.
Minister, we hear all different types of stories, let's be honest. I know people have stood around waiting on phone taxis to come into the city and wait around for an hour and a half. So, I mean, what I'm
Well, they
saying-
won't have to phone.
No,
Also have to say, a car simply pulling up to allow somebody in the back of it. To be honest, that strikes me as not necessarily being the safest and watertight of situations either, where people can be vulnerable. So it cuts both ways in that.
Well, single tier will allow, and I know, I suppose, displeasure with how enforcement has been carried out or not has been expressed today and before today. I've said we have seen a lot more enforcement activity over the past couple of months, but single tier will actually allow enforcement officers to concentrate on your illegal taxis and rogue operators rather than trying to police who picked up where at what time.
And that's the point I was going to come to Minister, before I was interrupted with the phone issue. The issue is this here, in relation to relieving the stress and pressures of footfall at a certain time. The industry needs to gather, both sides of the industry, and we've asked for that to be taken on board. Both sides of the industry would work together to try and relieve that pressure. But I still think, in terms of the 3 mile suggestion, I think it's a fairly good suggestion to try and come up with a solution along those lines.
Okay, Paul's just going to come on maybe a bit on the enforcement.
Sure, it's just really to give a bit of clarification around the issue illegal picking up, which is the main offence that the public hire have raised with the agency, and we have over recent months increased the number of operations trying to detect and deter illegal picking up. But in terms of if you had a 3 mile radius or a 5 mile radius, it doesn't really make much of a difference to our enforcement activity, because the concentration of illegal picking up is predominantly within the city centre. But the difficulty we have with detecting this type of offence is that Mr Weir said about possibly a Belfast team with 6 members of staff. It is a very resource-intensive offence to detect, because if I describe you, an enforcement officer has to successfully flag down a taxi to start with, has to take part in the journey, then has to be charged for that journey, and then issues a fixed penalty notice. That can take quite some time. If you had 6 members of staff policing that during the day, the number of fixed penalty notices that you would issue, our evidence would suggest doesn't deter or change behaviours. So if you had a 3 mile radius and you had 6 members of staff, I'm not convinced.
I'm not going to be tied in with the specifics of numbers, but I think there needs to be a dedicated commitment to Belfast. You see, to be perfectly honest, there's a range of things which are illegal at present, and it is clear coaching horses is getting driven through that. And you can go any night to check that out for yourself if you're doing it, and I think that's part of the problem. I think the one advantage, at least if you have a situation where you have a more narrowly confined area, at least you're allowing a little bit more concentration directly on that. But I think, I think the department, to show at least some degree of willingness to start tackling enforcement, if it was giving a commitment to where there does seem to be quite clearly a specific problem of agreement, because you're clearly having an overall enforcement team, but if you give a specific problem of people being, or at least promise of people being dedicated to Belfast, that would at least go some of the way to start doing that. If it's an issue, I have to say, it's an issue of having to say that, well, there are so many different hoops that we've got to go through to get a conviction. Well, perhaps we need to look and actually see whether, to be honest, we've got a system which is unnecessarily bureaucratic in relation to it, and see if there's any changes in the law we need to make there. Maybe we can cross that bridge when we come to it. I don't want to maybe tie that in directly with the current situation, but it is clear day in, day out the law is being flouted. And I think simply to then say, well, actually it'll be easier if you simply have a single tier, because there'll be a range of laws which won't have to be flouted anymore, is not the way to deal with illegality in that regard.
Why not? I mean, Peter, that's the way to remove it. If you have single-tier system, you don't need to have the enforcement officers to be checking. And also, you are maintaining the monopoly for one section of that business.
Sorry, it's not Belfast. I have to say, sorry, it is not a monopoly, because if I am in
anywhere in Belfast, I can pick up a phone, I can get any taxi in relation to it. So it is not a monopoly. Indeed, the danger is, and a concern is, that you will actually have a duopoly that potentially could come in on that basis. I would also say, the argument that essentially, well, it will remove the problem because it will remove a lot of the offences. I could cut if I was the Chief Constable and had full opportunities, I could cut the crime, or the Minister of Justice, I could cut the crime rate in half in the morning by abolishing half the crimes. That's not exactly helping in terms of it seems to be a fairly woolly sort of idea.
For the consumer, if you want to go somewhere, you want a taxi. You can't just step out of your house or your office and hail a taxi. Like other cities, you have to ring and you have to ask for a taxi to come and pick you up.
Some cities operate single tier and some operate double tier.
5 minutes will be 10 minutes or 15 minutes before you can get a cab. And I mentioned previously, Minister, probably maybe not you, of visitors to Belfast, very puzzled, telling me why they could see taxis with signs to say they're taxis, but flying past them and not picking them up. Now, if we want to be a place for tourists, we've got to be working that it is convenient for everyone to be able to get a taxi.
You have to phone a taxi when
Yeah.
you not only don't have a taxi number, but you don't know what
You
street
don't
you're
know.
on.
You see, for the visitor, they just see taxis and they want to go into an empty taxi. Simply, that's the way other cities work. And if we want just to have black taxis for Belfast, we need to have lots more black taxis, because very seldom you see a black taxis going down the street. You have to go to certain taxi ranks to get them. And if you're in between those taxi ranks, you're not going to be able to get a taxi by hailing them, down the street. I think we need to be thinking about the public. We need to be thinking about the consumer and about our image as a modern, progressive city to cater for everybody. Sorry, not Morrow. You've been very patient.
Yeah, well, Chair, most of the things that I was going to say have been said, and I suppose I'm going in and out of vain repetition, and I want to be careful about that. But, Paul here said that, to commit 6 members of staff to trying to police this or to monitor it. Did your department not carry out some monitoring at, for instance, to take an example, at Ravenhill ground? And do you have that report available?
There was a number of operations in terms of detecting what was happening at Ravenhill, and we then took legal advice on observations, and the department then arrived at a position which was issued to the major operators on the legality of what was currently taking place at Ravenhill.
What was the legal advice you got?
There was legal advice taken from the departmental solicitors.
Which said?
Which was reflected in the guidance note that was issued on the...
Chair, sometimes we get 3 words used. I don't know why they is particularly used. Sometimes we get the word information, sometimes we get the word observation, and sometimes we get the word report. Now, I'm not sure what we're going to get. Is this a report?
This is
an observation or an information?
This is the legal position regarding taxi provision at Ravenhill Rugby Ground, dated 18th of October 2013, which was passed by the department to interested parties, and I believe has been provided to the committee previously.
Yes.
So that was the outworkings of the legal advice, which was based on the observations made on the ground at, in this case, is using the example you cited, Ravenhill Rugby Ground.
Could you just refresh the committee's thoughts on it and what it actually said? You needn't read it all, but I'm sure that there's salient points in it there.
Well, the advice reflects on the Public Service Vehicle Regulations 1985, the Taxis Act 2008, and the Taxi Operator Licensing Regulations 2012. And it reflects on the legality or otherwise of taxis proceeding to Ravenhill, and it makes clear that there must be an explicit engagement made from Ravenhill. This requires a request by someone other than an on-duty employee of the taxi operator to the taxi operator to send a specified number of vehicles at specified times to a specified location. And I think I've said before in front of this committee, the same as Anna holding a party and asking for some taxis to come to her house at midnight to take 6 guests. A record of this request must be maintained by the operator in accordance with the 2012 regulations. There are certain records then to be kept, so that's under the PSV regulations. Under the Taxes Act regulations, there are then certain requirements in terms of recording the details of the customers being taken into the individual vehicles from Ravenhill to their chosen destination. Date, time, location of pickup, location of drop-off, number of passengers. And they must be recorded prior to or at the end of the journey and returned to the operating centre within 5 working days. The advice then goes on to cover guiding patrons to taxis. Given that they have not been party to the engagement, it is important that the process of guiding the patrons to a taxi makes clear to them that they are free to use other means of leaving the ground, including other firms of taxi provider. Regulation 49 of the 1985 regulations outlaws touting, the activities of a person employed as a driver to tout, call out or otherwise importune any person to be carried for hire in the vehicle. Section 43 of the 2008 Act draws those touting provisions wider but has not yet been commenced. That is the salient point, perhaps.
And the point that really I'm trying to make here, it's in response to what Paul had said, that the time and the difficulty and all of the let me say around trying to detect, you feel that this is going to take just a world of time that maybe would be very difficult to enforce all of this. Because I mean, the bottom line, Chair, on all of this is the lack of enforcement. Now, I do not know, for instance, how many prosecutions your department has recommended for prosecution over the past 12 or 24 months. Have we got any figures like that?
Well, in the last financial year, we carried out almost 2,000 operations in which we issued 277 fixed penalty notice, referred 88 files to the Public Prosecution Service, and had 150 successful prosecutions in that year.
What year was that again?
That was 12-13.
12-13.
And we do have figures for the first half of this year. We've had almost 800 operations, 125 fixed penalty notice, 55 files referred to the Public Prosecution Service, 53 successful prosecutions.
Has any operators been struck off, provided, as a result of their conduct, they are told you can't operate any longer?
There has been, yes.
You don't have the number, no?
No, but we have revoked the licence of a taxi operator recently.
Chair, see, if the perception out there is that there's a lack of enforcement, then I think that reduces the confidence in the whole thing. And this is what, in fact, I mean, this is what I'm getting back to me, that there is this lack of enforcement. And now I've heard I'm not making light of what you've said, and I want to make that quite clear. The numbers of senior staff or staff that you have to engage in all of that, and I take that on board. But if we're going to drive this one forward, I honestly think that we're going to have to take another look again at where we are across this, because I do not see this, and I have to agree with my colleague here, Peter Weir, and Cathal Boylan, when he was speaking in relation to this, and quite frankly, where they are on it, I am too. Thank you, Chair.
I'm aware of the time. One last question, Colin.
Thanks, Chair. I'll not take long. I think if there's an enforcement body set up to enforce things, that they should be enforcing things. But as someone who gets quite a lot of taxis, it's in a different place, obviously, from where we're allowed to flag taxis. Never caused any trouble at all. But I would far rather see the enforcement authorities, and with the finite resources that they have, ensuring that I'm getting into a safe taxi, and that the taxi man is ticking all the boxes in terms of safety and health and safety and security and all that. And I just want to know how much of your time in terms of enforcement is given over to that compared to given over to figuring out who's picked up somebody here, there or wherever.
Well, as I said, over the last 2 to 3 months, we have, because of representation, been directing more and more of our time towards the illegally picking up. It is a difficult balance to strike. Previously, we would have been certainly channeling more of our resources towards those more serious offences, detecting those such as illegal taxis or the unroadworthiness of certain vehicles. But you know, with a limited amount of resources, it is a balance between those serious offences and the pressure them from representations detected for minor licensing offences, and hence they only carry a £30 fixed penalty notice.
So, is it likely then that with increased focus on the pick-up issue, the more serious offences and you know, will suffer in terms of enforcement?
Well, that's the balance that, as an agency, we will have to strike in terms of, you know, how we manage our resources. We do try to take a risk-based approach in that we respond to intelligence, but also we base it on operators and drivers' profiles. But as you focus your attention, obviously, on illegally picking up, you can't be out there doing targeted operations. And targeted operations, you know, you could be out for 2 or 3 nights and not get the particular taxi that you've targeted to get that night. So them, in themselves, they take quite a lot of time. But that is a much more serious offence to be trying to detect.
Okay, thank you.
The single tier system would wipe away that need for, you know, check on the illegal pickup. If everyone can just pick up a passenger according to the need of customers, the consumer kind of requests or demand.
Well, in terms of enforcement, it would certainly remove an offence, and it would allow resources then to be channeled to other areas. But that would be a consequence of single tier.
Well, I think we need to move. Oh, Pam, yes, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Quick.
Yes, very quickly, just following on from Colin, really. What role does the department have in ensuring that some of the vehicles of all descriptions on the road are actually roadworthy, safe and legal?
Well, we would do a number of operations throughout the week in terms of we will either be basing it on intelligence in targeting illegal taxis that are in use, or we will do random roadside stops where we will look for check the roadworthiness of vehicles. And in doing so, we will pull over a random survey of taxis, no matter whether they're private, public, or whatever. So we do have, that's one of the more serious offences that we try to dedicate some time to.
Okay, and finally, do you have any figures on results from?
Just the figures that I provided, Lord Mayor, those can be broken down, obviously, then into whether they were to do with illegal, you know, licence, illegal taxis, or was it a roadworthiness issue, but I don't have that detailed.
Could we maybe get?
Yes, sure.
Thank you. I know the Minister you have to leave about 12, is that right? 5 minutes. So if we moved on then to the report on the illegal waste activities in Northern Ireland, members, it's at page 18, a very long report, but at page 100 you can see the key recommendations as well. Minister, quite a damning report, you know, saying the regulatory regime is weak, and sentencing is low, and kind of if at page, I think, 22 is kind of saying lots of things are wrong. So are you going to implement all the recommendations in the report? About 10 recommendations?
Well, the report is quite damning, as you quite rightly say, Chair. However, unfortunately, I don't think it tells us in the Music Committee a lot that you mightn't have already suspected. I released the report promptly to ensure open debate and discussion as to how we fix the huge waste problems that we have here. And, my Permanent Secretary and the Head of NIEA will soon complete their analysis of the Mills report recommendations and provide me with draft proposals of how we action them. I'll review these proposals then and publish a full response to the Mills report.
Okay, and it's also very, very costly to try to remedy all the waste dumped in illegal sites as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're actually looking at that issue now. My predecessor managed to secure an additional £1.5 million from the executive to deal particularly with this issue, and some of that actually involves getting someone to cost the damage that has been done at the illegal dump. They'll come back with not only a cost but also recommendations or proposals around clean-up. it's in all our interest, obviously, to ensure that we have the polluter pay. There's a criminal investigation ongoing, as well as our own work through the department. But again, the report underlines and emphasises, I think, the seriousness of the problem that we have here with waste crime, and the huge financial gain that can be made by people who are all too willing to exploit gaps in the system. And it's up to us, therefore, to ensure that these gaps are closed.
Yeah, with very little risk of being caught.
Well.
Yeah. Okay, Minister, we look forward then to your follow-up on this column.
Just briefly, Chair, sort of reluctant to say too much when I know there's a criminal investigation going on, but what kind of work is going, because this was kind of a bolt from the blue and people didn't know it was happening, maybe people should have known it was happening, and it was a huge site on the outskirts of Derry, with lots of illegal waste dumped on it. What kind of work's being done now with the police and other authorities to figure out if this is happening anywhere else? I'm pretty sure it probably is, and if so, where?
Well, some more of the 1.5 million that my predecessor managed to secure was used to employ 10 new waste enforcement experts in NIEA's Environmental Crime Unit. That's helped us set up a major waste crackdown through what's known as Operation Toothfish. Operation Sycamore is the big one up in Derry, but Operation Toothfish is dealing with other issues. Has been led by the Environmental Crime Unit with the PSNI, and it currently involves 25 investigations across 31 sites. So this is a very widespread and very worrying issue.
Thanks. Who comes up with
Are
the
you
names?
looking, I mean, there were, I think in the report to say in 2007 or 8, there were people already informing NIA about the illegal dumping, but had there been proper investigation, the whole thing would have been stopped at that stage. Are you investigating into all this, the process?
Yeah, my permanent secretary is coming forward with recommendations on the report to me, but I was particularly perturbed by some of that reading in the report as well.
Okay. Alban?
Thank you, Chair, and I think it's very important to highlight this issue because it seems to me hugely lucrative to those who are carrying out this particular form of environmental crime. And I think it's important that you, Minister, and indeed the Executive, make representations to the judiciary in terms of bringing this mischief to their attention and saying to them that, look, this is a very, very serious problem and there needs to be exemplary sentences in order to highlight this particular issue and the pernicious nature of this issue, because it encourages criminal activity and it also damages the economy and it also damages the environment. And I think that this has to be repeatedly
Serious
emphasised.
crime, yeah.
I think the issue with this is that the profits so far outweigh the potential penalties to offenders, and it is an issue that I've discussed with the Minister of Justice. So.
And could also lead to us breaching directives, targets for landfills and all that we need to bear in mind. We could be facing millions of pounds of infraction fines from the EU.
Yeah, I think it's important that we get out too as often as possible that this is far from a victimless
No,
crime.
absolutely.
You know, it's
It
cost.
affects all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Minister. No more question. And very quickly, just want to touch on the climate change bill. Okay, quickly, at what stage are we now with the climate change bill? I know you put out a consultation.
Yes, well, my predecessor had, had provided you with a synopsis of responses to a pre-consultation last June, and you considered it last July, if I'm not mistaken. It's my personal belief that a Northern Ireland climate change bill is what we should ultimately aim to achieve. However, I'm not convinced that I have the necessary political support to do so. In fact, I'm fairly convinced that I don't. So it's my
You have our support, Alliance Party.
it's my view.
That'll get it over the line.
No, I think that if we are to agree successful approaches to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and growing a sustainable, productive, low-carbon economy here, it must be based on partnership working across the public and private sectors and the voluntary and community sector as well. As a follow-up to the pre-consultation, I very recently, just over the past couple of weeks, have met with stakeholders from business, energy, environmental and agri-food sectors to take on board their views on tackling climate change and how government can assist in providing them with the appropriate framework to encourage the development of a low-carbon economy. It's fair to say there was a lot of forthright discussion during those stakeholder meetings, but also a lot of helpful discussion. Various ideas and views have been put forward, and I believe that it is possible to build upon them. For me, the main conclusions to be drawn from those meetings would be that some people are still sceptical about the value of legislation at this time. All sectors would welcome working in partnership with the Department and government generally on the climate change agenda. I think it was interesting to note too that all the sectors that I had met would be interested and are interested in working with each other on this agenda as well. They all support improved Northern Ireland data and research to inform measurement that's recognised and accepted across all sectors. There's without doubt a need for a joined-up approach, as I've said, for success of the Green Agenda across all government. And,
Sorry, Peter, can you stop talking, please? I would like to listen to the Minister.
The government needs to be supportive of green business.
We'll be clapping you're an MEP.
No, just show some respect to the Minister, please. Don't talk around yourself.
Development of technologies, including the facilitation of access to EU and other funding streams. So I'm very encouraged by the meetings I had last week. And I hope this update's helpful to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Explorers, just quickly.
Sure,
I know
just on the climate.
They can't. Sorry. Oh,
Just
sorry. You want to go?
just
question?
quickly.
Okay.
I mean, I do welcome some elements of it, but I think there's a unique opportunity for new formation of councils to draw down European funding and adapt. And I'd like to see the department working in relation to that there. I think it's good, very good opportunity.
That's fair enough. And I think what was coming out of the discussions too is that not just the Department of Environment, but across government, we should be doing a lot more about greening up our own act. I
Totally agree with you.
It's
Greening up the island, I totally agree with you. Thanks very much.
Yeah. I think it's a false promise, Minister, that businesses or think that the environment, protecting the environment is going to damage the business. It's very much really a two-way process. It's interrelated. If we don't have the proper environment, we don't have the economy,
of course.
And
and
going
indeed,
upwards.
the market itself now is dictating environmental improvement in many ways for industry.
Yeah. It's not either or. It's really working together. Yeah. Members, okay? We moved on. Just one last thing, and kind of update on Explorers. I know the council now has kind of approved, I think, for 1 year reprieve. So
1 month.
No.
Is that right?
No, all right.
Oh, the business.
Said
The business
case.
Yes, the business case has been given to the development committee. Yes. So, what's your take on this?
Well, I've made no secret of my commitment to Explorers, and I reiterate that. I think it's a very valuable facility, and it's something we should all be aiming to keep open. However, it doesn't necessarily agree with everything in their business case, and there are some figures in there I would query, if not dispute. The council is seeking from the DOE £120,000 per annum for the Seal Sanctuary. I'm committed, regardless of the outcome of this, I am committed to a Seal Sanctuary. However, I'm not sure where exactly they got their figures from. They wanted a capital grant of £45,000 for signage for the Seal Sanctuary, and I don't know how the signage element would tie in with the conservation element that my department would be funding and remain willing to fund. But furthermore, Council seeking a further £900,000 capital grant to upgrade Explorers as a visitor attraction. I'm prepared, as I said, from within my department to look at what we can do. However, I'm unaware of any other ministers or departments having indicated what financial support they might be able to provide to make up that capital grant.
Okay. If Explorers has to close, what's going to happen to the Seal Sanctuary? Would you be willing to just keep that part open?
Yeah, well, that's something I have given my commitment to do, and I reaffirm that commitment today.
The committee went.
But I'm not sure it would cost 120.
The committee went down to see it, and the seals are just lovely in the pond and in the
Did you find it?
cubicle type thing.
Did you find it okay? So there was no problem with signage?
No.
I had problem with
Strike that out.
Minister, I actually had problem with my sat nav. I put it in my sat nav, and it took me to Strangford. And I had to take the ferry to go across.
That's the normal way.
And it wasn't just me. Apparently, if you're in Belfast, you put in the directions in SatNav, they'll bring you there. The car in front of me in the ferry going over, they were from the city council. They did the same thing.
Well, I'm going down there tonight to the STC, so thanks for the warning.
Just key in Newtonats and then go from Newtonats. Yeah.
Bring the signage along.
I'm actually just looking where somewhere is on the map and driving down that direction as opposed to Rhode Island.
Okay.
So, I mean, whatever happens to Seal Sanctuary is going to be part of it, because I think, to be fair, that is something we're leaving aside the rights and wrongs of other decisions and that type of thing, who's got responsibility. That's clearly something which does fall within the DOE.
Oh, without a doubt.
Obviously, it's vitally important from a conservation point of view, and could only really happen there. And that.
No, we'll remain completely committed to that.
Well, we've covered all the items, Minister, that of concerns to members. Thank you very much for the generosity of giving us so much time. So we'll look forward to seeing you again. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all the your staff too. Right. This is maybe the time that we have a break for our. Have we got our lunch out already there?
Is it? I don't know.
Antoinette, is our lunch there?
We could do these other bits and pieces.
Okay. No, lunch is not there yet. Okay, then we very quickly then moved on then to other bits, and then
Page, Chair.
So let me see. I'm looking for page 6. Yeah. If
Page
we
6.
go on to in your pack, it's what page is that? Well, we don't have that page. Chairperson's business. Just to mention to members now, we really need 2 more additional meetings. So we've only 2 weeks ready to go before we need to finalise our report. So may I suggest next Tuesday, that's the Tuesday the 11th, and Tuesday the 18th, we have 2 additional meetings from 12:30 to 2. Lunch will be provided, and we'll do a working lunch then on those 2 occasions. Okay, members happy with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then we have draft minutes at page 474. Members, are you content to agree the minutes?
Great.
Okay, and then matters arising at page 483. You have a summary of all the items there, members. That's very useful. Departmental first one is at page 485. Departmental reply regarding Institute of Archaeologists Ireland. The committee, we sent a letter from the group, from the archaeologists group, to the department for their comments following our meeting with them on the 23rd of January. Department has indicated that discussion of the current situation in Northern Ireland regarding the reporting of archaeological excavations contains a number of inaccuracies. Officials have almost completed, they say, proposals for archaeological archives, which will need to be brought to the Minister for the Environment and the Minister for COW, as well as both committees. The Department further states that during its briefing to the Committee for Regional Development on the 15th of January, some of the assertions from the Institute about current practice in archaeology and roads schemes were not correct. Officials from NIA have offered to attend that committee in respect of archaeological requirements and development, and offered input to the Department of Regional Development about some specific issues raised on that date. Members, any comment on this, or are you just content to note?
Nope.
What they are saying is that the Institute made some incorrect assessments. So we'll wait for them maybe to come back to us.
It's the department asserting that the Institute made incorrect assertions.
Yes, it's the Department and NIA saying that
And,
some of the issues they raised.
But I'm just wondering, does the Institute accept that the matters that they
We went forward and then replied back to them. Yes, replied back to the Institute.
Yeah.
So we'll see what
Yeah.
they...
So see what they say.
We'll see, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So they don't say exactly what are the inaccuracies.
Yes.
So maybe
We
maybe
need
the
that
two group they
clarified,
need
yeah. Yep.
they need to meet together. Okay. Updated departmental work programme is at page 487. Members, content to note? Okay.
Yep.
Next item is the draft committee response on EU priorities at page 499. I want to thank the staff for a very thorough piece of work there. Members, I certainly went through it and would agree with the priorities. If members haven't really time now to look at it or haven't looked at it, certainly quite a lot of priorities arising out of funding and the need for us with environmental
Chairman,
protection.
you'll have to study that very carefully.
Yes. We'll have to keep that in my mind all the time to remind ourselves what are the priorities.
When you go over there too.
All right, okay, I see now. I see what you're trying to get at. I suppose I would get jibes like that now for the next few months.
You'd be ahead of the posse, you know.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. It's good to have information. Yes,
Oh, yes.
yes. Thank you. Members, content to note?
Yes.
Yep, yep. Members, are you content for us to send that to the FM committee?
Content.
Which wants our input. Then the next one is an SAO1, members. It's a Planning General Development Amendment Order NI 2014. At page 507, the order sets out what type of development can be undertaken without requiring a planning application. These are referred to as permitted development rights and allow certain, often minor, non-contentious types of development to proceed without the need for a planning application. The order will introduce permitted development rights for development ancillary to mining operations and provide permitted development rights for the installation, alteration or replacement of an air source heat within the cartilage of a dwelling house. I think it's all these geothermal kind of system being put in place. It is proposed that the rule will come into operation on the 3rd of March 2014. Members, are you content for the department to proceed in making the rule?
Content.
Content? Okay.
Chair, we got a consultation a wee while ago that included sports clubs, I think, and that wouldn't have to put in for planning, would be exempt from planning application for small
small
development, but
extension,
I'm assuming that's not in this.
No,
No, it's
no,
only
it's
two.
not. It's very, it's different, yes, yeah. Yeah. Okay, members, then, next item is correspondence. At page 47, you have a cover note there. Just to bear in mind, some issues, as page 520, you have the Hansard transcript of the Fermanagh Trust's briefing to the Committee for Enterprise, Trade and Investment on wind energy development. So, members, are you content if we include this in our final inquiry report on wind energy? Okay. So, next item is at page 536, and is correspondence regarding the Committee for Finance and Personnel inquiry into flexibility working. Members, are you content to forward to the Department for comment on the extent to which flexible working practices are being applied on any good practice cases and on the number of employees who undertake all or part of their work from remote locations? Okay, members content with that? We sent this to the department and asked for them to look at it. Then the next item to look, the next one is at pages 540 to 578. They are just for notes, comments, for notes. Yeah, and we have also tabled to paper. Freedom of Information request, asking for details of the informal committee meeting with DOE officials which took place on the 17th of December to discuss taxi issues. Members, are you content to note for the time being? Okay, we need to be sending them the notes anyway.
They will pass back to us the completed Freedom of Information request information for the committee to note that when it goes back.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
request or
The clerk has taken notes on the day. So, we'll, members content that we give them the notes. Yep. Then that's really nearly all. Is that right? Correspondence. Yep. Then and just to say, next meeting. Just remind members next Tuesday.
we don't really need to do the
we're doing local government first. Okay. Lunch is there. Good.
Yes,
Right, members. We're back for 12:30, members. 10 minutes, bit of lunch and comfort break.
No, it's Tony.
Stretch your legs.
The best proposal all day.
At the same time, then we can do the guidance, which will sort of put the flesh on the bones of the legislation and start to identify some of the sort of the councils will want to sort of think about in moving forward on it, because I know that there are a number of issues that sort of respondents identified in terms of this clause on specific issues, around the sort of sustainability, green spaces, the environment, etc. Those are all issues that we can sort of deal with and talk about in the legislation, in the guidance. In terms of the regional support structure, I think there's sort of, I suppose, two sides of that. You'll have the partnership panel will provide that sort of a forum for political debate between councillors and executive ministers to sort of address any issues that may come up in this context. But then one could imagine that sort of local government themselves may want to look to see what lessons they can learn from neighbouring councils, so that you have that, you get that duality almost in terms of supporting, the advancement of community planning across the region.
Okay, that's already structured there.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, members content with that? Okay, moved on then. The second comment is this clause should include references throughout to community and voluntary organisations, even just categories, they were saying.
Well, I think, Madam Chair, that we'll certainly be addressing that issue in the guidance, because I think in terms of the main provisions, I think that the key players, there are on two sides. One, the statutory bodies and the departments who are sort of either providing services or delivering functions within the council's area, and then the community in its entirety. We certainly in terms of the community, we talk about the voluntary groups. But I think in terms of the involvement of the various sectors, because you have the community sector, but you also have the business sector who will have something to add to this. Perhaps faith groups. There are a whole range of bodies that could have a role to play, and I think it's probably better to ensure we provide the appropriate coverage, cover that in the guidance. And the guidance can then be looked at and reviewed on an ongoing basis to provide to ensure that we are providing the appropriate steps. And certainly the department are working with our departmental colleagues to alert them to their role in community planning, and we'll be starting to engage with statutory bodies who are we are likely to name in the subordinate legislation, to alert them to their role in terms of community planning. So we're trying to put that whole supporting structure into place, without the need to necessarily name the community and voluntary sector on the bill, because you can do it in other approaches.
That sort of engagement with departments and the potential statutory partners, that's going to take place over the next 6 months. It's really to explain what the expectation is of community planning and what part those statutory partners and the duties that would be placed on them.
And in fact, that engagement is starting very formally this afternoon with the first interdepartmental meeting on community planning, which Leo O'Reilly is chairing. And I think it will be important to make sure that all departments, not just those that are transferring functions, understand what will be a changing relationship between central and local government, and how community planning will actually help departments in delivering against their programme for government targets. Through this sort of top-down, bottom-up approach, which, as I've said already, will take time to develop, but should be the ultimate outcome of what community planning is there to achieve.
Okay. I think the voluntary and community sector's concern is that if they're not named and included in the face of the bill, they could be easily, forgotten and not be engaged with. So, how do we assure them, your guidance will be very clear?
Guidance will be very clear, and the guidance it will be statutory guidance, so that provides additional weight in terms of, there will be a duty on councils to have regard to the guidance, so you're starting to build in those safeguards, as it were, for the community and voluntary sector, that they will be engaged.
Okay. I just wondered maybe one, and I know it's never just as satisfactory as legislation itself, but one route which has been used in the past as well is going to appreciate, I think it's very clear what the intention of the department is on that, is whether it may be by way of a almost an agreed intervention when at consideration stage, particularly even for yourself to raise that as an issue at some point whenever you're dealing with other issues, and for the Minister then to give a very clear and firm commitment on that basis.
Yes. If during consideration stage, if the Minister can give that assurance,
certainly,
that in the guidance, that they will be mentioned, and because they do have an important role in rolling out or even establishing the community plan, rather as well as the implementation of it.
Oh yeah, certainly, and we would never have envisaged community planning going ahead without that sort of engagement.
Yeah,
and I think also, just to a final comment on this. For councils who are taking over urban regeneration and community development responsibilities, they are going to have a vested interest in making sure that the voluntary community sector is active in helping the council to achieve a set of common goals. So I think there will be a natural fit with all of that. And over and above that, because there's a statutory link between the community plan and the local development plan, And in the local development planning process, there is a requirement for community consultation. Taken in the whole, it would be very difficult to envisage whether or not the department does produce guidance, which we will be. But I can't see how councils would be in a position to ignore the vulnerable community sector. And indeed the communities that they represent. And I mean, the bill does say that local government will have to take into account the views of the communities and their representatives. So, I think in the round there will be a very clear and distinct role for the vulnerable community sector.
Okay, members content with the explanation?
Chair,
Tom.
I think that's fair enough, but it is going to be quite a difficult balance, because obviously, they have to take into account what communities and groups say. You can't implement everything that community groups will come forward with, because there's such diverse opinion.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to get the views, but then obviously I'm assuming it's all going to be up to the council and the councillors to actually decide then.
Yes.
Is that right?
Oh, yes, very much so, Mr. Elliott. And I think the guidance will point to the fact that the need for effective engagement with the community, so that I take your point clearly that there can be expectations that things can be done, but councils will have to look in terms of sort of the resources that they and their community planning partners have available. But you hear stories where people will say that if you give people feedback on why you can't do a certain thing, it can actually sort of help to ameliorate the fact that you're not doing it. And those again are issues that we would envisage addressing in either the guidance or perhaps additional advice notes that we could be doing, because I think we've got to view community planning as, terrible terms, but a living process. We're not going to get it right first time. We need to have that sort of framework in place to allow it to sort of develop. Scotland are where they are now after sort of over 10 years. We can't just jump straight in, halfway down the race.
Yeah. And the councils have to prioritise and according to their resources and maybe their own work plan. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
And just sorry to finally finalise this. That is another reason why we are not listing large lists of organisations or departments or agencies that absolutely must be involved in every area in all community planning processes, because this is about flexibility at local level, and local democracy needs to step in here, and there does need to be a decision-making process at local level as to where the priorities for the community plan will lie, albeit within the set of parameters that is set out in this bill, the subordinate legislation and the guidance. And it is a balancing act, there's no doubt about that.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And you get almost a wish list to, from the committee, and they see, of course, their own needs, and then you have so many different needs are coming in, and you just have to prioritise. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Members content with that? We moved on. Next issue is in relation to 6.9, Section 2A. For a need to link objectives with PFG targets, and I'm sure they'll do that.
I think the difficulty is, that will come through the operation of a community planning, because I don't think this bill can place that sort of direct duty on departments or statutory bodies. I think that's got to be a sort of developed through the operation of community planning and the partnership panel.
Yes, there's talked quite a bit about realignment of departmental policies and resources with the community plan actions. Okay, members content?
Yep.
Right, moved on. Next one is 2A again, need for definition of well-being.
Again, that, Madam Chair, we will address very clearly in the guidance, because that's something that we need. Because I think sometimes people sort of look at well-being and think purely of the health, well-being. But this is, as you can see, is a much broader issue, and it's about sort of quality of life. So we will be looking very clearly at ensuring that there is a sort of as fulsome and comprehensive a sort of a definition of what we mean in terms of social, economic and environmental well-being as is possible. And the guidance, we'll be developing that in partnership with local government, and then it will be going out to sort of the consultation. So it gives us several opportunities to make sure that we get the definition as holistic as we can.
Okay. Is there any way you can look to borrow and copy in terms of the phrase well-being?
Certainly, Madam Chair. In developing the guidance, we'll be looking at the guidance that was issued in Scotland and has been updated over the years, and the guidance in Wales. So we will be looking, at sort of other guidance and definitions so that we can get, as I say, as comprehensive and as effective a definition of what we mean by wellbeing and what we expect community planning to deliver, included in the guidance.
Yes. Now, we talked about guidance and guidance and guidance. When are those going to come out?
Well, there's initial guidance in the form of the foundation programme that's out at the moment, but that's really the starting point, and it's more a blow-by-blow or step-by-step guide for local government to consider what do they need to do now, between now and 2015. We're looking to the experience that local government has going through that process, and we'll be doing that in the coming months, and then developing what will be the final guidance, probably sometime towards the end of the autumn of this year. I mean, we clearly do want it to be in place as soon as possible. Once the new duties are taken over. But we do want to leave enough time in this period to learn from the experience of local government and starting to get their heads around it. So again, we're trying to strike a balance between allowing that experience to happen, but not leaving it so late that then it becomes too tight. So it'll be sometime, I would say, towards late autumn.
Okay. Because I mean, from May, when you have the Shadow Council, people should really start to be thinking about doing this.
Yeah, and that's where it was important to get the foundation programme as the initial guidance out. Clearly we can't issue statutory guidance until the councils take over the statutory duties, and that will be the 1st of April next year. But in the meantime, we have the foundation programme, and we do want to learn from that. And I now have an operational community planning team, which will be working very closely with each of the new clusters, and in time each of the new councils when they're elected, to start looking at on the ground at how it's rolling out and what lessons we can learn, so that we can make the guidance as practical as possible.
And guidance can be revised. Do you intend to revise them, say, after a few years?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, as I think Julian and John have both said, this is going to be a living, breathing process. I don't think it's ever going to just stand still and we say, well, that's it, we've done community planning.
And as John has mentioned, I mean, the opportunity is, not just to revisit the guidance itself, but if particular issues come up, to issue advice notes on specific issues, throughout the period.
Okay. Carl?
Yes, Chair. I mean, obviously, as long as the guidance is in statute, I don't mind. I mean, we've seen guidance in the past. It's only clearly about interpretation. But I just want to ask, and this is an issue I certainly need addressed in relation to this bill. And I think on this clause there may be an opportunity. But see, in terms of social well-being, and the likes of tackling deprivation, poverty and social inclusion and all of that, is that what we're looking at here? And I'll use this example. The area that I live in, the small town, there's 3 different wards, and some of them estates, because they're connected to a rural ward, they're deemed to be affluent. So in effect it stops some people in terms of likes of Sure Start and getting on to different programmes which would support them things. And I looked at in the past trying to look at the wards issue, but I think there may be an opportunity for the likes of that. Now, I'm only using that as an example, if you understand.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I remember in my experience with neighbourhood renewal, for some departments, neighbourhood renewal was seen as too small a geography.
Yes.
But actually, for many people in some pockets of deprivation, it was too big a geography. And so, DSD then looked at pockets of deprivation and areas at risk and tried to sort of expand on what was a very defined geographic area. And, I think, well, certainly within community planning, there won't be those very defined geographies apart from the council boundary. And even then, I think there's opportunities for councils to work in clusters on issues that might actually go across both borders of councils and indeed the border, because one of the things we're doing in terms of capacity building is working with Cooperation Ireland to see what the opportunities are for looking at community planning on a cross-border basis for those councils that are at the border, because again, issues don't stop because there's a geographic boundary.
And that's the point I was trying to make, Chair, because even though we're getting urban regeneration, it should be the new neighbourhood renewal, and some of the areas that I know, there are pockets of deprivation.
Yes.
But what I'm saying to you in relation to this clause, because I'm sure under the power of the general power of companies, you could look at addressing some issues. But in terms of this clause itself, I was thinking of looking, maybe putting it on the face of the bill, but if you were saying that the social well-being element would address those three issues within it, and clearly defined in guidance, but in statute, I'd be content. But I would be looking, if you think that's strong enough. But Chair, I would be asking the question in this committee to support me bringing those three elements specifically. But if you're saying the likes of tackling deprivation, poverty, social inclusion, all of that's incorporated in that, I would.
It is very much, Mr. Brenner, and I think we've got to look at it in terms of the community planning within a council will also be to an extent overlaid by the strategies and the policies that are being taken forward on a regional level. And the community planning, although the community plan will be for the council district, that community plan could be made up of maybe a number of thematic plans, or it can look at area plans. So it can start to address very specific areas that aren't, as Lena says, maybe picked up in some of the general statistical analysis. And I think one of the key issues for community planning, and it's something that's been clearly identified in the foundation programme, is starting to get that evidence base. So you're starting to look at that. And I think there's also then a link through to an area that we'll come on to later, and that's the performance improvement, where you're starting to get issues that are being identified through the community plan being factored into the council's improvement plan. And one of the issues there is around fairness, which starts to look at those social obligations about dealing with deprivation, etc. So those are all issues that we will be covering very clearly in the guidance, and looking to see how community planning can address those.
Guidance as in statute?
As in statute,
yes. That's an important thing, because this gives you the tool to engage with our statutory agencies to address those issues.
Yes.
That's the tool for doing that.
And certainly the statutory guidance, if you look at, because I've looked at what's out in place in Scotland and in Wales, it's not just statutory guidance for the council. And we've developed the provision in the bill that the statutory guidance will also cover the duties of the statutory bodies in terms of their community planning obligations.
And I would guess to say, the community plan would have to be thematic. You just can't have one large document. So within it, you have headings, you have themes, and then again reflect regional policies and regional actions as well. Colin?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much. Just in terms of 2A, social well-being, economic well-being, environmental well-being, I wonder, is this the place to put in equality within the district and good relations within the district? The community planning would be an opportunity to promote equality and good relations.
Again, I
don't mind where it goes, to be honest.
Again, I suppose the thing is that community planning is a statutory function of a council, so therefore they will have to take and as a body specified, as a public body, they have to observe observe their Section 75 duties.
There's a difference, though, between observing your Section 75 duties and promoting equality, and the same goes for good relations.
Again, I would sort of give, in some respects, the same answers I've given to Mr Boylan. As whether you feel sufficient, but the statutory guidance will certainly highlight that because it can highlight all of those key factors that need to be considered by the council in taking forward community planning.
To be honest, it's difficult to agree to that until we see the statutory guidance, if you know what I mean. I do think this is an opportunity to put something on the bill that talks about equality and equally talks about good relations. I think a large part of what we're doing here is about trying to foster those principles and those ideals. I think this may be an opportunity in this particular part of the bill to do that.
We actually yesterday had a meeting with the Equality Commission, and this issue was raised about promoting equality and good relations and how we could work with the Equality Commission to see how that could be done.
Did you come up with it?
Is this going to be an amendment or is it going to be in guidance?
No, it would be possibly in capacity building, is what was being mentioned.
Okay.
Because the Equality Commission was saying that the new councils would have to be reminded of their equality and good relations duties under Section 75 duties.
Yeah.
And actually that would have to be enshrined in all the new council's policies. And I know that they're now working with the change managers and the equality managers in each of the councils and clusters to start their thinking on how they're going to not only amalgamate policies. So if you've got 2, 3 or 4 councils coming together with maybe a slightly different policy on one specific issue, they're going to have to not only amalgamate the policy to create one, but then they're going to have to equality proof it and screen it.
Yeah.
So, there is quite a big job of work to be done, I think, within local government around the whole issue of equality, good relations. They were also particularly interested in ensuring that it was enshrined in the Code of Conduct for councillors.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I think it goes without saying that people should act in accordance with the law around this stuff, but there is a slight difference in saying that people that councils as a corporate body should promote equality and should promote good relations. I think this is an opportunity to put that in the bill. This may not be the exact place to put it, but I would ask you to consider if it is, or if there's somewhere else that we could put it on the face of the bill.
I mean, I would say that's probably part of the social well-being part of the.
Well, then, Linda, the next question is going to be: if we see the guidelines,
yes,
see exactly what's coming down the tracks.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if not, I would certainly, Colm said, and even some of the stuff I touched on myself, to try and get on the face of the bill.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I think we have been lobbied, like I said to Colm, about good relations, and that maybe this is the time to put it in to strengthen it. Just about equality and fairness. The definition of what's good community relation too is expected of the councils. I think in legislation, in a few places, they do say that they have to promote good community relations, but what does that mean? Maybe we need to put it on the face of the law to say what is good community relations, or in guidance, clearly saying, this is what they have to observe in order to promote good relations.
Well, if we were to take this matter back to the Minister and see if, if the Minister would, after considering this, possibly give an assurance that that will be in the guidance, is that?
Okay, yeah.
But consider putting it on the bill first.
Okay, we'll
after you throw it out completely, you can then look about the guidance.
Right.
Yeah.
After consideration, we'll talk about the guidance.
The key word is statute.
Yes. And the guidance will be statutory.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously a lot to come still on stream. Next issue, 2A3 should include the environmental word, should include the creation of green spaces and wide places. Can't really name everything, isn't it?
Yeah. Appropriate for guidance.
Yeah.
And also bear in mind that that strikes me as something that might be considered in the local development plan, which will really, in many respects, be the physical manifestation of the community plan, and as you're aware, there's a statutory link between the two. But you know that the creation or maintenance of green space would be something that you would want to look at in an area-based physical planning environment, but linking it to the community plan.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Linking the land use plan
Yes.
with
Yes.
community plan. Members content with that? Okay, moved on. Next is 2B, the need for definition of sustainable development suggest that use the Brundtland Commission's definition of sustainable development.
And that's, as I said earlier, a number of the issues specific issues that have been raised by respondents, others that will be addressed in the guidance. It's not appropriate to necessarily address them on the face of the bill.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Move on. Okay, folks. 2C, the clause should include a reference to children and young people's strategic partnership.
Same again.
Again, yeah, guidance. Okay, next one, 2C, amendment to emphasise improvement in service provision, to identify actions to be performed and functions to be exercised, including those related to the planning, provision and improvement of public services by the Council and its community planning partners for the purpose of meeting the objectives identified under paragraphs A and B. So this is the suggested amendment. I think it's community places.
The legislation is already sort of providing that sort of the partners have to take the various actions. There is also a link through to the council's performance improvements, so you have that sort of link between issues identified through the community plan to their performance improvement. It's not appropriate, I think, for us to be specifying in terms of the other departments or the other statutory bodies. They have their own accountability mechanisms, and we need to build through that. I think the other aspect we need to sort of consider in terms of that sort of suggestion is that sort of while service delivery, can be maybe an important aspect of community planning is not just about service delivery. There could be other actions that could be taken that could improve the well-being of the area. So I think if you start to build in those specifications, it can actually then start to act as a constraint on what you're wanting community planning to deliver, rather than sort of assisting.
Okay. Okay. There's so many of them. The next one is, I'm just trying to look at the wording. At 2C, members, is a suggestion, insert a word and agree after identify. So 2C says identify actions to be performed. So to say identify, to add the two words and agree actions.
I think the combination of the sort of later provisions where it talks about consensus, I think the agreement of those sort of functions and actions to be taken is implicit in the sort of the totality of the provisions.
Okay. Okay, members content with that?
Yeah, great.
Yep. Okay, next one is on 2D, a suggested new clause which says positively plan for renewable and low carbon energy generation in order to improve the environment, economic and social well-being of the district. That's 2D.
Again, I think that's more appropriate for the guidance. It's another issue which would be.
I think again that's a decision for the council, and it will link into, for example, their planning function and the renewable energy function related to that as well. So it is something I think council is going to have to agree on. What is their common policy on energy, renewable energy, wind farms, all of that, and I think that is for the council to determine.
Okay. Members content with that? Yep. 2D, the next one is 2D, suggests new clause there and in the wording and in cooperation and conjunction with community and voluntary bodies from the outset of the process. So to add in that phrase, in cooperation and conjunction.
I think, as as I was explaining earlier, Madam Chair, I think certainly the community and voluntary sector, the statutory guidance will provide for that. I think you need to have the space in terms of community planning for the council, the elected members on the council, the statutory bodies, and the departments to be able to look at these issues, before and determine at what stage they want to bring in, the community, the voluntary group bodies, and representatives of the community, because after all, the elected members of the council are representatives of the community. So I think they have to be given that space to take that forward and get it to a stage where they feel comfortable in engaging outside of that sort of framework.
Yeah. And again, maybe the Minister in his deliberation during consideration stage can emphasise that, that the community and voluntary sector will have a very major role in this establishment of the community plan and its implementation. Then 69 3B, another comment is it should include reference to making adequate resources available within partners' financial plans.
Again, that comes back, Madam Chair, to the whole issue of accountability and the arrangements that are already in place for the statutory bodies who are responsible to their boards, who are ultimately responsible to the ministers. And I think it wouldn't be appropriate for us to be specifying that. I think it is one of the issues where community planning will see that the alignment of the various activities, and the partnership panel provides that political forum to discuss any issues that are arising in terms of perhaps a particular statutory body's lack of engagement. So I think we're putting the framework there to try and support the delivery of community planning without it being overly prescriptive.
Yeah, I think that could maybe move on to the next clause, which is about community partners. Yeah, planning partners. Okay, members content with that? Right. Next comment. One last comment on 69, and that's on Section 5, and clarification required and guidance needed as to how councils are to develop a link between land use plans and community plans. I think Linda mentioned a bit of that too. And what is the timescale for this?
So we're starting to work with engaging with our colleagues in planning to see how that can best be taken forward, and parts of that could also be taken forward. I think during the foundation programme you start to get that you're addressing the same issues, because I think one of the things that was identified in the working group that was looking at planning and community planning was the fact that in many ways both the area plan and the community plan will be informed by the council's vision for its district. So because of that, you then can have that twin track in terms of the the two plans and getting that alignment.
It's very much interrelated.
It is.
Yes.
And the department has now committed resources to working with each of the statutory transition committees at this stage on the land use planning issue, because clearly there are many local development plans. Some are old, some are new. Some are new, but maybe the council didn't necessarily agree with everything in them. So there's going to have to be a lot of work done to develop a new local development plan for the new council areas. And 6 senior staff have been identified within the department to work with the statutory transition committees to start that process at the same time as looking at the foundation programme. And when you look at the early stages of community planning and land use planning, And the first stage is to gather evidence and decide where your priorities are, what your vision is. And so those early stages are so aligned that we see a lot of synergy happening. I also am aware that DSD has also committed resources to working with each of the transition committees on what an urban regeneration plan might look like. And again, all of this has to link in and be aligned because there's such it's like a continuum between the three of them. And so there'll be an awful lot of work done, I think, in the next 15, 16 months before community planning takes over fully.
Sure. And for each new council, there would be probably a raft of different plans.
Yes.
For the areas combined.
Yeah. And the first challenge, I think, for everybody in all of this will be to look at the existing strategies, plans, initiatives, programmes. Belfast mapped them, and there were hundreds for Belfast alone. And how do you make sense of that and try to sort of, take out the duplication and enhance them rather than just add yet another layer? And that's, I think, what we're all trying to avoid in this.
And how many of them have been on the shelves for many years and not touched?
Yeah.
I think, Chair, in respect to that, a lot of councils have been doing community planning, whether it was called that or not, for years. And I suppose the main difference was there was no statutory requirement for the partners to be involved in this. So I'm not so sure it's 15 or 16 months that this will take, because other than trying to maybe get one council previously to agree to the community plan as such for well, I'll use Cookstown, Macrofelt and Dungannon as an example, So what Cookstown maybe have as their priorities will obviously be different than Macrofelt and Dungannon, and trying to incorporate that. So that's probably where the time will be spent, is trying to get some form of an agreement within those, maybe not just be as difficult as maybe I think, but it's more, I'm just a wee bit concerned that, we do things sort of medium term. And say, well, listen, you've said 15, 16 months, and that's fine, but a lot of this work's already done. It's just getting it brought together and to actually get the other partners who, at times, came along because they had an interest and they wanted to be there, but there wasn't that statutory responsibility. But alongside the statutory responsibility, means that it's not just a low-level member of staff, and that's one of the key things that has to be sorted.
Yes. No, and you're quite right that there's been an awful lot of good work done in many councils already, and when we mapped out what was already there, or initiatives that were being undertaken, I mean, there were some really good examples where certain councils had taken a theme, for example, crime or health, and they'd work with PSNI or DHSSPS or Investing for Health or the local health trusts, and they were starting to show real outcomes and improvements in that. But I think the community plan will clearly have to take that very good work but expand it, and as you said, you start to align what might be the approach in one area and turn that into an approach for the whole area, and take into account issues that maybe weren't tackled fully and properly aren't currently being tackled, but now councils will have the ability to do so, like smaller pockets of deprivation. Taking all of that into account. I think, as we said, this will be an iterative process, and I don't think the first community plan will be by any means the last community plan that any council will have. But I absolutely take on board the fact that there's an awful lot of work already being done.
And that was actually recognised in the foundation programme whenever it was being developed, the fact that you did have councils, but it was trying to make sure that we got to sort of the 11 councils to a sort of the same sort of up to the same level if possible, but as you say, Mr. McGregor, recognising the work that had been done in the various councils, under various guises, but were really community planning because they were working in partnership with the various bodies.
Cahill, do you want to come in?
I think, just quickly, Chair, but I think it's a brilliant opportunity to link both community plan and area plans, and I say that, and I've some concerns I think it should be a long-term, whatever the vision is, but it should be long-term, because some of their plans are not fit for purpose at the moment.
Yes.
But it's an opportunity now for people to get that together. And I do agree there's a lot of good community plan. There has been good work, but I think it's a very, very good opportunity for us now to start that process over.
The community places suggested the community plan should be published within, I think, after 3 years of the start of the new councils. This comment's asking, is there a timescale for the two to be published together?
I think we've had a discussion about that, Madam Chair, and we discussed this with Mr. on Tuesday afternoon. I think the difficulty is that if you put a time frame on it, where do you set the time frame? And you have the problem that if you set it too tight, you end up with a community plan that is published simply to meet that timetable. Whereas, if you provide that flexibility, and again, I'm sort of claiming a lot for the guys, you can start to put pointers in terms of, the movement we expect, but, as Mr. McCrae said, a lot of councils, have already done a lot of good work on this, and they would be able to build on that, the work that we're doing with the other departments, and with then the engagement with the statutory bodies to start to tie them in. I wouldn't imagine that it will take a significant period of time. Councillors will be wanting to sort of show that they're using those new parks. This is something that, from my engagement over with the policy development panels, and others in local government, they want this. This is provides them a great opportunity to actually deliver for their local communities. So they're not going to be sitting back and waiting.
At different levels, isn't it? Yeah.
The other issue is, if you set a time frame of, say, 3 years, quite often in life, the task that is in front of you expands to suit the time frame in which you have to do it. And, it could then be perceived, well, actually, we have a 3-year process ahead of us, and in some areas it could actually take a lot less time. So we think, on balance, and it's the Minister's view that it would put a false constraint onto councils, and that actually councils will understand it's in their interest to do this as speedily as possible.
I think 69 got a fair hearing.
But then I think they feel that, obviously you put a time frame to say, no later than 3 years, councils can, if they want in the first year, to publish it. But their concern is that the councils can maybe just put it on the long finger and delay it. But the Minister's not keen to set a time frame.
No.
Okay. Right, you. Okay, members. Okay, we moved on then to 70. Okay, which is on reduction of community plan. It's on community planning partners. Members, as you all know, this clause provides a power for the department by order to specify the bodies or persons who are to be the community planning partners of a council. Quite a number of comments, and I'll start with the first one, which is on section 1, and this community planning partners, they said, should be listed on the face of the bill to oblige them to participate.
I think, Madam Chair, you're faced with a dilemma. If you name them on the face of the bill, yes, we could probably identify a number of the required community planning partners now. But what happens if you then have, a new body being set up that you want to have involved in community planning? You've then got to change the primary, and that's why we went down the road of the subordinates. So you have that flexibility to add or remove bodies, and also then if bodies change, for example, one would anticipate at the moment that you would have the education and library boards. But if you then move to ESA...
But you still have to use subordinate legislation, though.
Yes.
Even now, your thinking must be, DE and others.
Yes. But, as I say, using subordinate provides us greater flexibility to to list the bodies and then to modify that list as time goes on, either to add bodies, remove bodies, or if a body changes its name, to deal with it rather than changing the primary.
So when are you going to issue the subordinate legislation to name them?
It's being worked on at the minute, but I think it's going to be issued around the same time as the guidance.
Would be
Hand in hand
in
with
the
guidance.
autumn.
Yeah.
In the
In the
autumn
autumn.
of this year.
Again, you know, that's an area where we want to listen to local government, see who they feel they need at the table, and then also talk to both departments and their agencies. And it's actually likely not to be necessarily departments that are named, but their agencies and bodies, because it's really the delivery arms that we want there. So it might not be the Department of Health, but it would be the health trusts.
Yeah.
You know, so it's at that level that we would want to work at.
And over the next, few months, the department will be engaging with potential statutory partners to explain what all of this will mean, and that when they're named in the legislation, the duty that places on them.
Yeah. Would you be asking, say, people from the community and voluntary sector who they believe should be on it? Because they would be the user or the receiver of services.
We'd certainly ask them for their views about which...
The public, the public, public and,
We would be consulting widely on I mean, we'll be consulting on all of this, but I think to come to the position where we have a document we want to consult on, we'd have to clearly talk to all stakeholders, and the voluntary community sector would be one of them.
Yeah.
And we have also, as a department, contracted with Community Places, and one of their prime roles is actually to look at assisting local government with developing their links to communities and to the voluntary community sector, and defining the role of that sector in all of this. So, I mean, through that mechanism, we'll also be looking for views and seeking views.
Sure. Okay. I think they certainly have been working on this for some time. Yeah. Okay, Nick.
Chair, on that,
yes.
on that point, is this not getting back to what I asked earlier about the groups? Surely it would be very difficult, even subordinate legislation, to start naming a number of groups.
No, we wouldn't. Not voluntary community groups. No, we would be seeking their views about which statutory
So who are you
agencies.
actually going to name under this?
This would be
Statutory
the
bodies.
statutory public
Department.
bodies who are delivering
Okay.
services or taking
That's
action.
fine.
But we'd just be seeking views from the voluntary community sector.
All
Probably
right,
those should be.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. It's like arm's length body at council or sports council, and rather than the Department of
the housing
Town.
executive, for example, or its successor.
Yeah. Okay.
Put it down just yet.
Sorry. Okay. Ian, you do have to leave in 10 minutes?
Yep.
Right. Well, we're near enough to 2 o'clock anyway. So we'll finish when Ian goes, I'm afraid. Yes. See how important you are, Ian?
Are there any other members who are not
That can come
in
back?
committee meetings that could come back for 10 or 15 minutes? No?
Unfortunately, Chair, I mean, I could stay a little bit longer than 10 minutes, but I would need to be wearing them tied up for the rest of the afternoon.
Chair, when it's only informal session, can we not operate with 4? We don't have decisions, do we?
Yeah, I think my understanding of the quorum is 4 where there's not a decision.
Yeah.
I think the only issue, certainly from my point of view, I would need to wait 2 would be my
Well, I
answer.
need to wait
Yeah,
2 as
well,
well.
majority of people
But
would
if
have
we're
to
on
go on
one,
to.
too.
That's okay.
So we just go on then to 2? Yeah.
No, we can't go on to 2. We have to go.
But we
have
don't
to
have-
stop
but-
when Ian leaves.
Can we
No,
not?
because if we're not
We
making
have 4.
decisions.
We're sort of
have
saying
4.
we're broadly content with clauses. Is that a decision?
but-
Not?
Chair, my understanding is on any of this stuff, we're not, I mean, we're talking through the issues, but there's
Yeah, we're not taking any
there's no
formal
decision
decision.
actually being taken at
No.
all as regards to
Right,
this.
okay, that's
Yeah.
okay then.
And that's it.
Is that okay? Yep.
Informal.
There you are. You're relieved. Yeah.
You're more relieved than I am.
Okay. We moved on. Sorry, folks. Come on. So next one is in relation to, let me see. Still, Section 1 should be compulsory for senior representative to attend meetings. Yeah, that's Ian's point, really. Isn't that right? That the partners should be should be senior representative. Where's that? 71. I don't quite understand.
Madam
Do they
Chair.
mean that we have to keep it on the face of the bill to say there must be senior representative?
Again, Madam Chair, you're back to this accountability. It's not,
Yes.
it's up to the organisation, the
Okay.
statutory body, to ensure that they have appropriate representation. It may not all, always be necessary for, say, their chief executive to be there. Once they have signed up to particular actions, then they could delegate that activity to sort of some of their directors. But I think we've got to bear in mind that we're talking about 11 councils, and to try and expect chief executives or senior officials from the various bodies. But again, those are things that we can start to address both in the guidance but also in our engagement with the statutory bodies to emphasise the need for appropriate representation at those sort of community planning partnership meetings.
And it could also be an issue that could be dealt with at the partnership panel, so that the parent departments are, that those arm's length bodies, are part of. You can discuss at the partnership panel the importance of ensuring that people of suitable,
Yeah, although Linda,
whatever
this
it
has
be.
been really reiterated by various groups to say that we need people with clout, senior enough representatives to come, not just sit there and say nothing, can make decisions or bring back and have influence to get things done. Yeah,
And I think the fact that the community plan will include targets and outputs that are expected from all the partners, not just the council, is one way of ensuring that when an agency or statutory body commits to that there is a commitment made, and if that commitment isn't stuck to, or if it's not being effectively carried out, then that needs to come up through. And I think that is one thing that will be discussed at the partnership panel, should that be the case.
sure. Okay, I think perhaps a word of assurance from the Minister would be useful. Yeah. Okay.
Going to have to give a very long speech.
Yes. Ian. So-
No, I think it's one of those things. I know if it's the PSNI, for example, I don't think anybody expecting the Chief Constable to come along to the meetings, but on the other side of it, there's no point sending, and no disrespect to any constable, but there's no point sending a constable if a inspector or chief inspector is the person who's going to be making those decisions as a district commander. Therefore, it needs to be that more senior person, to be able to ensure that things that are agreed, and whether it's targets that have been set, that it's not, just someone who is nodding as if everything's
It has to be
okay,
somebody suitable,
and they go,
qualified,
and they go back. So
The suitable person is
It's-
going to be able to make the decision, to implement the decision.
Yeah, very much.
But then the agency come back and say no, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the next comment is,
Not yet.
sorry, government departments should be included. They specify, I think, the same issue for you too. We just leave that guidance. Okay, members, content with that? Okay.
Just on that point quickly, just a question. In terms of statutory agencies, obviously people have gotten a feel now for who we're talking about here. Has anyone come back to say, respond in any way? Did the housing exec or anybody know this?
Well, certainly, I was at a meeting with some staff from the housing executive recently, just to update them on where we were. And certainly, from that conversation now, as I say, I wouldn't want to be sort of, the individuals, not committing their organisation, but I think they clearly see themselves as having a role in this.
Process,
Yeah, and actually, other departments such as DARD and Justice have proactively been talking to us about the links to community planning, also health. And in Justice, I mean, they've clearly identified the need to align what happens in police and community safety partnerships and with the community planning partnerships, and finding a way of making sure that those two don't overlap. So, you know, to be...
Chair, the only reason I asked is because I can only see a list of the people who's responded. These are key people who's going to be playing a big role, but it's gone.
Mind you, if you can find out what happens with community safety partnerships, no, maybe tell the rest of us.
Yeah. The thing is, the community planning is good for departments
Exactly.
as well, because you know the community planning can help them to deliver their remit.
And you know, if you talk to the people in health who deal with investing for health and the health promotion side, they can see benefits from having done sort of mini community planning type projects with local councils and the health benefits that can come from that. So, you know, I mean, I keep saying, you know, if the only way that this will work is by absolutely pinning everything so down and tight into legislation, it's actually not going to work, because this has to be a coalition of the willing. And, you know, I think it will really start to get teeth when agencies see that this is actually an effective way for them to deliver on their commitments.
And talking of consultation fatigue, you know, the public can just going round and round in circles, going to different departmental consultations, whereas you can concentrate it in one place and get it done. Okay, members, we'll move on. Next one. No sanctions for non-participation by statutory bodies. Very difficult to place sanction on legislation, is it? Again, accountability, as John said. Yeah. Okay, moved on. Next one, need for, it's in relation to 3C, need for clarification of who the department may consider appropriate. Again, I think guidance would cover that.
Yes, and as well as that, that's just to cover all. That means that, you know, covers us for naming anyone in the subordinate legislation that's appropriate.
Okay, and the next one again, we talked about this one, they said should add, including community and voluntary bodies. More guidance will cover that. 70 and section 5, a suggestion to insert a new clause saying that the department may by order modify subsection 1 above by adding a reference to any eligible body. 75.
What's that? What's that? 70 what?
70. Okay, clause 70. At the moment, it goes down just to section 4. So a new section, a new clause. Yeah. The department may by order modify subsection 1 above by adding a reference to any eligible body.
I think it's this linked to the suggestion that we name on the face of the legislation the bodies, and then you have a provision to allow you to amend it. I think that's what that, but I mean, I think that
adding a reference to,
it's appropriate for us to name them in the subordinate legislation rather than on the face, so we wouldn't need that.
Okay, so what it means is that to add?
Who's requesting this?
Yeah.
The RSPB.
Okay.
And I think, and all of that apart, we've got 3C, which allows the department to specify other such bodies and persons as the department considers appropriate.
Yeah.
So I think
consultation.
Oh, sorry, that's the consultation. Sorry. But yeah, I think Julie's right then that it's only because they want us to name everybody in the face of the bill, and then also provide ourselves with the ability to change or add to that list after the bill.
Yes.
Okay. That's just to widen it out a bit. Is that what they want to say? Just any eligible group. But then the word eligible is going to be argued too. What do you mean by eligible?
Exactly.
Who determines eligibility? Yeah. We moved on then. Members content with that? Yeah. Then next one is 71.4A in relation to that. Sorry, next one is on community plan. The clause specifies that once a council and its community planning partners have reached a consensus as to the community plan objectives and actions, the council must produce a document known as a community plan capturing that consequence. Okay, 71, a few of them. First one is on 4A. to say that there should be a specific time frame. We've talked about that, not as soon as is reasonably practicable by the council.
Yes.
So I think one organisation has said maybe 3 months. You think that's good enough?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Members content with that? Not to specify the time. In relation to 4C, there should be a specific timetable for engagement, say 1 year, and for agreeing plans, say for the 2 years. Again, being too rigid.
Too rigid.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Members content with that?
Content.
Okay. 4C, to amend, there's a suggestion to read 4C there, must be produced as soon as reasonably practicable after community planning for the district has reached the stage described in section 2 and no later than within 3 years of the formation of the new council. Again, the same.
Chair, just to say, just to save us a wee bit of time, if you don't mind, is it possible to just, if you read out the clause and the reference point, as opposed to reading out all the descriptions, because we all have it here.
Yeah,
I mean, if
sure,
you say it's 71.
Okay, right. Yeah, happy with that. Yeah. Rather than me droning on.
No, it's grand. I mean,
Just the volume of stuff getting through.
Yeah, sure. Okay. We moved on then. 72, no comments. We moved to 73. Okay. So the first, we all have that table. So the first comment, maybe Julie or Linda to respond. New clause. Oh, they don't have it. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You don't have it. No, they don't have our table. So we have our table.
We have a table. We have a table which
I'll read that to you.
Chair.
Yes. That's 73 to A3. Suggestion is to insert a new clause which says report on means of consultation with the persons listed in 76.2, including a summary of the outcomes of consultation.
I think, again, we're back into, you're starting to straitjacket the accounts that they're having to report back on how they consulted.
Yeah.
The guidance will sort of point to the need for engagement. That why do you then put that sort of additional burden on them to report back on how they conducted that consultation? Because I think the engagement will point to there are various means of engaging that we will point to in the guidance.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Members content? Okay, next one is on 73, section 5, clarification needed on degree of consensus. 73.
Well, I think, Madam Chair, sort of, you either sort of have to tie it down completely, and you're never going to get total agreement. You've got to sort of put a point where, the majority of the bodies around the sort of the community planning partnership table sort of say, we're content that, we move forward with this rather than sort of trying to be overly prescriptive.
Yeah, majority vote. Is that right, Peter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. To be fair, they're part of the process from the start. I mean,
Yeah. Okay, moved on. Next 10 is right. We are on to 73, section 6. To amend the clause to read, the council must, as soon as is reasonably practicably, after become subject to the duty under section 4, and within 6 months, publish an amended community plan. 73.6. It says the council must, as soon as after becoming.
It's back to timescales.
It's back to timescales, Madam Chair.
Yes, within 6 months again, really too rigid. We're happy to move on, okay? Next one, we're on to 74, okay, 1 and 3. And it says there, the comment is that there's a need to include monitoring of outcomes, unclear how community planning performance will be assessed without it. But then again, I think our City Council says there is a great difficulty in assessing long-term outcome, particularly.
Exactly, and you'll have the sort of the link to the council's performance improvement plan, but you will monitor the outcomes, and so I think you can, and this aspect of monitoring again will be covered in the sort of the guidance to sort of provide that sort of additional framework.
Yeah. Okay, happy with that? Okay, we moved on to 74. Sorry, to 73. But the next comment is under 3A, John. Suggest to amend clause, insert progress made towards meeting the community plan objectives and outcomes for this district. I think it's the same thing to add on outcomes. Okay, we moved on. Yep, to 75. And again, I think it's, the suggestion is that it should be amended to include government departments. Will be under guidance and subordinate legislation as well. Okay, then move to 76.1. Okay, and suggestion is it should be stronger. It should be amended to read: councils and its community planning partners must seek the participation of and encourage people, including children and young people, to express their views and ensure that their views are taken into account. I think their concern is that this is a bit too woolly, too vague.
I think, Madam Chair, the difficulty there is in terms of you can't always sort of force people to engage. That what we're trying to say is the council must make arrangements to sort of engage with the community, but I think it's very difficult to go beyond that. Because there will be individuals in the community or sections of the community who may not necessarily want to be involved in the process, and I think if you bring this amendment forward, it starts to sort of straitjacket the council in terms of its flexibility to move on, having attempted and put in place arrangements to try and engage. If they don't get a response, you then got to be able to sort of move on to the next, with the process.
It also means that you're actually naming, particular groups when actually you would have, the chance that you might actually miss very, naming important groups. So therefore, it's maybe better to do it in the guidance and by encouragement, of how engagement and with whom engagement should take place, and put that in the guidance, rather than specifically name people on the face of the bill.
Well, it's not saying to name them, but to just make the wording stronger.
Yes.
I think the concern, I think this is from Community Places, to say just simply saying to ensure that arrangements are made so that the persons mentioned in section 2 have the opportunity to express.
Yeah.
The concern that then it could be just, and that first just run in the website, that it's just not proactive enough to go and seek them if we use the word seek the participation.
But I think that, it comes back to that issue, that how far do you go in trying to seek the participation of groups?
Okay.
There are some groups that will want to sort of get themselves involved and very clearly will sort of be coming forward, but there are others who may be more reticent. And as I say, I think to sort of be saying to the council, you have to seek their engagement, I think it can act as a sort of a barrier, perhaps, to developing the sort of that engagement.
What do you think?
Chair, I was just going to ask, what's the mechanism if some group believes they haven't had the reasonable opportunity to respond or be consulted with? Have they a mechanism for complaint?
Sometimes the groups don't even know, when consultations are, taking place.
Yeah.
If say you have on a website to say consultations taking place, people don't have the website, or people maybe first language is not English or whatever, disability groups.
I think, Madam Chair, what we'll be looking at, if we're going to deal with that issue, and then I'll come back to Mr. Elliott's point. I think certainly in terms of the guidance that we'll be issuing, and I know that sort of, I think in Scotland, they issued sort of advice notes on engagement with the community, because you start to look at sort of using, so, it's not just an advert, in the paper or on the council's website. You start to get into sort of maybe local meetings, into using the social media. There are a whole range of approaches that can be developed. I suppose the issue in terms of groups that feel that they haven't been engaged fully is through then either sort of their elected representative, either on the council or in the assembly, or through sort of the various representative bodies that are out there.
Yeah, I take on board what's been said in relation to how far you seek people in that, and I appreciate I think what the wording there is not that far off, but I wonder if there's any tweaking. I mean, I appreciate probably the point that you've made in terms of that it's not just seen as an absolutely pure tick box exercise, that sort of shown something has been done. I mean, I'm wondering, because it would have certain legal, if there was something about ensure that reasonable arrangements are made or something of that nature, would suggest that something that is just fairly inadequate wouldn't suffice, type of thing. But it's got to be something that. Because that is a certain sort of judicial review type implication to it in that regard. I wonder maybe that might be one way around it.
Well, we can certainly take that suggested amendment back to the Minister and come back next time with a...
Just
to strengthen
stronger
our
wording,
to
strengthen
I think there's a question probably of finding a bit of a tweak there somewhere that can sort of cover
we'll look
that.
at that.
Okay, thank you. Then next one is, this should be stronger, saying 76(1), amend to read, the council and its community planning partners must seek the participation. Same thing. Well, I think we can move on if you're going to look at an amendment. Next one is 76(2), trade unions should be included.
Yes. Again, the guidance will sort of identify the groups, not include the trade unions.
Sure. Okay. Next one is 2 again. Should include low-income children, their parents, and carers.
It's going to be a very long list. I mean, I think there's
pages of it.
Yeah, when you try to pinpoint and highlight one particular part of the community, where do you then stop? And I think the whole purpose of community planning is that all elements of the community should be included and considered and involved. I know that particular interest groups will want their particular interests specified, but as I said, where do you stop? You'd have a list as long as your arm of.
And I think the guidance.
Can you use Section 75 groups? Just mention Section 75 groups.
Well, that'll certainly, the guidance will sort of point to the sort of the broad groups, but I think we've got to sort of put faith in the sort of the elected representatives on a council to ensure that groups and the communities that they represent are engaged with.
Okay.
And what about then business groups and faith-based groups and other minority parts of the community, or old people, women, men?
Yeah. But then if it's like categories, Section 75 type categories, maybe easier to catch up.
Well, again, I think the whole sort of equality ethos is something that needs to be enshrined in the whole process from the outset. And as I said, we've been looking at and working with the Equality Commission to see how that could best be done.
Yeah. The councils themselves need to take responsibility to be inclusive.
Yes.
They have all sections.
Yeah, they have a duty now, and they'll certainly have a duty come 2015.
Okay. Moved on, members. Okay. Under 2E, amend the clause and to remove the wording "in the opinion of the council" and add the phrase "including NGOs and local action groups." That's going to be difficult, isn't it? Yes. No. Okay, we moved on.
I think we'll move.
Okay.
Move on now, Chair.
Yeah, we moved on then to 77. Suggestion, only one suggestion. That first suggestion is to change the word "may" to "must."
we're back into
Yeah,
the
yeah,
discuss the same
yeah.
argument we had.
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah, sure, we've discussed that before. Yep. 77.2c, comment is we need, there's a need for development of guidance in cooperation with councils and other public sectors and community bodies, and I'm sure you will do that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely.
2c again, add to include, to include community and voluntary sector. Okay, it will be in the guidance. 77.3, section 3 should be stronger than must have regard to. Let me see, 77.3 must have regard to, but there's no suggestion of, how to replace it. I think that's pretty strong. Must have regard
Yes,
to.
I think there's a misreading there somewhere. I think
What's wrong with the council?
How much stronger can you
Fairly
get?
strong,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right. We'll move on then. Next one is 78 members. Okay. 4 comments there. First one is to add the minister after every Northern Ireland department, and I know you've explained to us that you can't do it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We moved on.
Can you change that to the
We're
north of Ireland?
okay. We're waiting for legal advice.
Can you
Sorry.
change that to the north of Ireland? No, just okay.
Yeah, yeah. So when
Put
are
that
we
member
getting,
down, see
when
how
are
far
we
you get.
getting legal advice?
It'd
Who
be
is
good
getting
debate.
legal advice? Is the department or
No, the
ourselves
committee
getting
we asked-
department?
We agreed to ask for
Okay.
legal advice.
When are we getting that?
We should be having it at the end of this week tomorrow.
Okay, okay. Right here? Yep, yep. And 78A there to remove the word aim to. 78.
Yeah,
Yes.
the ministers agreed that, so we'll be
Ministers
bringing forward that
agreed.
amendment.
Yes.
So that would read then, in exercising the functions will must affect community planning and encouraging communities planning then. Is that right, to remove the word aim to?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, yeah, that's good. Well done, Minister. Man to my heart.
Somebody must have been very tired when they were writing up the stage. They were tired.
Yeah, yeah,
They were
yeah,
tired of that.
yeah,
like, throw it.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe
Okay.
it pains us to success, that norm.
78B, amend clause to read, must have regard to the content of a community plan in relation to the exercise of that department's functions and agree with councils and the community planning partners how the department can assist in the implementation of the community plan. Amend clause to read 70. We'll take a whole clause out. B. So how can we do? Probably. At the moment, it says must have regard to any implications of a community plan for the exercise of that department's function. So, how do one can this what's your comment on that?
78B.
Yeah.
I think that's comment from Community Places.
Right.
I think the idea is really to make it stronger.
What's it?
I think the problem, again, Madam Chair, it's the same issue that we had with the statute of powers, even more so that sort of, departments are accountable to their minister, who in turn are accountable to this assembly. And to start to sort of put sort of constraints on them being able to meet their, the executives and this assembly sort of priorities, in place of sort of, the community plan. I think we've got to try and strike the balance, and in terms of that particular sort of subsection, we have actually gone further than the corresponding provisions in Scotland and Wales, where they only have aim to promote and encourage community planning.
Okay.
We have included that very specific provision.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Sure. Let's have
And that's
that.
something which, as Linda was saying, I mean, Permanent Secretary of our department has actually, had set up meetings with other
permanent secretaries of other departments, just, you know, to explain and to discuss the importance and the change that actually the community planning duty that will be placed on them will have on them, and the fact that they must take account of the community plan for the 11 years.
Convinced them the benefits of it.
Yes.
Yeah, the potential for benefits. Okay, we just finished maybe 79. I can see it's 2 minutes to 2. So 79 then is, there's only one comment, a need for negotiation with trade unions in relation to staff impacted by transfer of functions. I'm sure that's being done anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. And anybody set up to operate community planning.
Yeah. You want me to finish 80?
Yeah,
no comments on 80. So then on Tuesday we'll start with 81.
81, okay.
Finish 80 there. Whatever.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For sticking with us all this time. Okay, we'll see you next Tuesday. So, members, that the only thing that I need to say is, if I can find really just members, just next meeting, really, to tell members, next meeting. Yeah, 12:30 in here.
No, probably room 29.
Probably room 29. We'll email around to confirm. Okay, thank you.
That's a carry.
Getting there.
You getting there?